3000.
Right, what is doing? My name's Maloney. This is the 3000 podcast. I'm joined today by a musician, a rapper, and a father, Dialectrix. Thanks for coming, man.
Thank you for having me.
I have to say straight off the bat, the name. Where did you get the name from?
All right. Originally, my first rap name, embarrassingly or weirdly, was called The Grinch.
Really?
So, for numerous reasons that needed to change. The first one being that someone told me the name already existed. He was referring to the Grouch. So, there's another weird, strange turn of events where I could have been called the Grinch, which, you know, might have had its own sort of charisma or pizzazz to it.
In a parallel universe, maybe.
In a parallel universe, 100%. So, you know, I'm pretty semi-obsessive about that sort of thing, and I do believe there's another version of me out there who is currently called the Grinch. But so that was my first sort of moniker and the first thing I was going under at the age of 15, sort of 14, 15 onwards. That was the first alias I picked. And then when I had to change it, I felt like the Grinch was a little bit childish, a little bit too playful, possibly not representing where I wanted to go. I was always wanting to challenge myself to be a somewhat complex lyricist, and the Grinch just didn't really convey that. So I was trying to search for some technical sounding, you know, amalgamation of words.
Which
And I was in high school, and the words dialect were on one side and electric was on the other side, and I went, oh. And 15-year-old me is now 30-year-old me under the same name. So that's where it sort of came from. It's got me in trouble. Heaps of people can't pronounce it or spell it correctly. Sometimes wish I had something like the Grinch, but yeah.
And I'm sure at some stage people will got you confused with Dialectrix as well.
Yeah, especially when we're on the same bill.
That's confusing.
Especially when we had the same manager, and especially when we were on the same songs. So it was a bit of lack of foresight in some respects when there's a flyer with only a couple letters, looks like a double up. When people are trying to pronounce a tune and the features, and then it's like Dialectrix featuring Momo from Dialectrix. It's like you've radio presenters have got a tough job as is, you know, going through all the different names, and then boom, you've got that issue there. So
you gave him a challenge.
Inadvertently gave him a challenge.
All right, so that was. I've always just wanted to know that myself personally. So thanks for filling me in on that.
Blackboard, mate. 15-year-old Blackboard high school.
Let's go back to where you grew up. I know you didn't grow up in Melbourne. This is where you reside now, but where did you actually grow up?
So growing up, I would probably say Blue Mountains. So if you split the age difference from when I was born to say 18, you're almost splitting that in half. New Zealand, Blue Mountains, West Sydney. So I would say, you know, my most formative, influential years were up in the Mauis, up in K-Town and Katoomba. So I was sort of explaining this in other interviews before, but like the Blue Mountains is a massively long stretch of land, and there's plenty of different places in between. You could essentially drive in a straight line for 200k and you're still in the Blue Mountains. So to say you're from the Blue Mountains is a bit non-specific. I was right middle, so there's sort of like a spectrum of how culturally diverse, I guess.
Really?
Like Penrith is very bogan.
But that's closer to the city, isn't it?
Yeah, well, that's at the foot of the mountains. So if you compared it to sort of where I currently live, which is oddly similar to the places I sort of knocked around out in West Sydney, like at the foot of the Dandenongs, you've got all of your southeast Melbourne, and then you go up into Belgrave and higher up into the Dandenong. So the Blue Mountains is very similar to that. You've got the base of the mountains, and you've got West Sydney, you've got Southwest Sydney, you've got the Currajong, you've got all those sort of areas there. And once you start to go up to the mountains, it's pretty much one straight line all the way up for hours on end. So, and yeah, sort of where I was going with that is the higher up you go, the more alternative and the more beautiful and more scenic it is. So all the crazy, the Three Sisters and your scenic railway and all the touristy stuff, and the train line that goes up through there. Which when I was younger, like it was just it meant bugger all to me. I was just like, yeah, whatever. But like all these other people, like dropping their jaws at these panoramic vistas or whatever. I went back recently, and it's like holy shit, this is insane. Like it's the most insane, world renowned sort of views. So I grew up Blue Mountains in Sydney, which is pretty much smack bang middle between Penrith and Katoomba, and yeah, culturally it's probably smack bang between the two as well. So you've got as I said, sort of right wing bogan, Krispy Kreme at the bottom, and then you've got hard leftist, artistic hippies at the top.
Yeah.
So it was I actually look back pretty fondly in retrospect at having those two opposing cultures relatively close at those formative years,
And does that make for some interesting meetings at the local watering holes and such?
It does, like in a way that sometimes can be really good, and in a way that can be really bad. The first sort of gigs and shows and things that I did as a teenager, like I dabbled in, I played rugby league, played rugby union. I was a bit sporty. Some of my mates were into basketball, skated. Obviously, you've covered a lot of skateboarding, so there was a huge skateboarding scene in the Blue Mountains.
I think Dustin Dolan was from around
there.
Absolutely,
Dustin was from Katoomba. I didn't know Dustin, but I saw him skate a few times. I was hugely intimidated by that dude. He's a crazy presence. But he was there. Like at least he was a figure that you knew of. He was like a somewhat mythical figure. So, but there was, and he was, as you've sort of spoken in some of the other podcasts, he was on that sort of punk spectrum, heavily, punk aesthetic, punk look, punk attitude. So there were a lot of other skaters in my direct community in Springwood who were, they were in hardcore punk bands.
Yep.
And then we, as I said, Joe New, who I grew up with and went to the same school as him. We went to Wimberley High. He was 5 years older than me. He was hardcore basketballer. Our mutual friend was Pace One. He was a graffiti artist. So it was like a big melting pot of different people. But there was just, because it's so isolated and rural, people like most people in rural areas, they're either going to gravitate to drugs or some sort of expressive outlet, if not sports. So yeah, there's
booze. A lot of the time, it's booze.
Yeah, a lot of booze. So it was a great place. As I said, as an adult, looking back at it in retrospect, there were a lot of things I took for granted from the Blue Mountains that I possibly thought was boring. I may have even thought that it was a bit depressive. You are quite a long ways away from what you think is popping or cool.
Yep.
But at a certain point, when I got to sort of 14, 15, I started to understand from the people I looked up to that if you travelled up to the top, there was a really cool, expansive scene of DJs, breakers, graffiti artists, heavy metal bands. Like
just creative.
There was just a lot. There was a lot of cool youth culture shit coming out of the top end of the Blue Mountains. So if you were more creatively inclined, you could just take a train up, and there was a vast amount of resource to accept you in if you wanted to go that way.
Yeah, and so that's where you discover hip hop, or you discover music in general. I know you played drums as well. Was it the percussion that came first before you got into the rapping stuff?
Definitely was. I was more playing instruments before I got exclusively into hip hop, into rapping. My father was a drummer. My brother was a drummer. My father's side of his family is very musical. So his cousin was a somewhat successful singer back in the late 80s, early 90s. So his name was Mark Williams. And I think he had a pretty big single around that time. So he was my dad's cousin. And I just had plenty of huge influences from his side of the family. Like my cousins were all massively into hip hop music.
Yep.
So I was pretty fortunate in that regard that they were showing me from the ages of sort of 8 upwards, 90s classics.
Yep.
The stuff that was huge over there and probably huge here in the States was quite, prominent in the charts in New Zealand. So
Yeah.
probably the first cultural shift I felt coming from New Zealand to Australia was the dramatic absence of rap music. Like it was like
It's
landed
true.
here and it was not there. It was gone. So
It's true. Like I'm a little bit older than you, but I remember at high school, there'd be a few kids that were into hip hop at the start of high school. For me, by the end of it, everyone was into hip hop. Like it did happen, and it
Yeah.
became the norm pretty quickly.
Yeah, it was like, and I guess it was area specific as well. So at that time when I arrived in '96, and it felt like, I've said this in a few different interviews. I just remember landing. I've never been in 30-degree heat before. It was like 38, 39 or something like that. And when Triple M's playing, and it's just like the no rap crap.
Yeah, I remember that
and it just like the heat, Parramatta Road, that ad, it strikes a deep resonant chord with me that you're at a vastly different place and country, and because that's all I was really listening to at that stage.
Yeah, New Zealand was a early adopter, I think, for hip hop culture in general. Like people were breaking and people were doing all those sort of elements and stuff like that, which I'm sure was here as well, but maybe not commercially on the radio at all. You know what I mean? Here, it wasn't. There wasn't anywhere to listen to it.
I look in without going too far down racial avenues because I really just can't be bothered, to be honest. I think New Zealand is, and I'm half Māori. My dad's Ngāpuhi. We've got Polynesian blood and culture, so I think all of my cousins from his side of the family felt naturally like there was no barrier or barricade saying not for you, because of the color of their skin, because of the way that they dress. I feel like Kiwis have always, and Polynesians have always been considered themselves, people of color, and like can just kind of stroll into these genres that are, maybe called racial specific genres like hip hop or reggae or whatever. So there was no sort of division from the music in any way when I remember growing up. But when I came to Australia, it definitely did feel like you're white, you can't do it.
Really?
Well, I'm saying that, but like, and maybe if I wasn't all of 9 or 10 years old, I could have found. And as I got older, you're only talking the space of 3 or 4 years, from the age of sort of 10 to 13, 14. I did find some very accepting and rich communities who were fluent in their knowledge of hip hop, their history, who'd been in it for decades, almost at that stage. By the time we hit the early 2000s, I was meeting DJs and breakers from Sydney who had been doing it since before I was born.
Yep.
So I am generalising quite a fair bit, but my perception of it as a kid was that it was just different. So like my musical influences came from NZ, my family. By the time I hit sort of Blue Mountains and had found like a bit of a pocket of people later on down the track, it was there as well. Like it was plentiful. There was DJs, there was gigs. It was a great place and a great time.
And it's also a good time for hip hop in general, sort of that 96, 97, I think Doggy Style came out a few years before that, and you've got, a lot of big albums that are coming out, and people are actually paying more attention to that sort of stuff.
Yeah, for sure. Like it was, as I was saying, like on the charts in NZ, it was huge. Like I left and Shay Fu's Chains was number one. Their number one artist was a Kiwi rapper. So
which was so far advanced to where Australia was in that sort of thing.
Even before the Hoods were, you're talking possibly 10 years. 10 years of graduation for them to have a similar amount of success for a local artist in their own country or whatever. But yeah, like it was mainly instruments, and then segues beautifully into the nature of your other interviews. But skateboarding, I think, was a massive turning point for that late 90s teenagers, Anglo-Australians in the late 90s that were getting their first fix of underground hip hop.
411 or skate videos.
Shorties for Full Dream. Birdhouse, The End. It's just Zoo York. It's just so much like thick punch of classic American hip hop getting filtered through that avenue, and that's when my friends who weren't into it at all of a sudden were pretty down with sound bombing or pretty down with whatever, Mos Def.
Yeah. And it's interesting because I think punk rock and skateboarding go hand in hand. A lot of ramp, vert, transition skating, ripping, going really hard. But when it comes to street skating and smooth style, I think hip hop really fits with that sort of style of skating as well.
Well, it's like I look back on a couple of things, and I'm in a thread with other, mates of mine who are pivotal hip hop heads in the Sydney community. So $2 in there, he's got a little thread that we share with our close mates, the SRG thread. Shout out to SRG. But I was I've dropped little things when my son started skating, and my kids are starting to sort of possibly all turn into skaters. I would love it if they all did, but my oldest is certainly a skater. And I started looking back at some old late 90s videos with what I thought were really nicely edited hip-hop tunes on top. And even just the Element video where they're landing on the beat. And I was just like, dude, it just fits. It does beautifully. Like even the way, even the pace of what they're rolling is at a similar BPM to sort of 80s, 90 BPM track. And so when they're popping, grinding, stomping, landing, it's even the sounds of the skateboarding fit magically to 90 BPM boom bap from that era. And I just don't see, like, I think that's probably the biggest difference between the skate videos I see now when they're skating to trap or drill or EDM or whatever. And I'm just going to sound like a classic old man. Like it was better back then. Then it's just like it even just the rhythm and the fluidity of the movement. It actually didn't even have to be edited that much to hit with the booms, like the tricks were fitting into that. So
and even some stage the pushing off just looks stylish when you've got that beat behind you.
Yeah, it fits pretty well. Whereas what you're saying, if someone's skating faster and they're a bit more slappy or burly or zero-esque, for lack of a better term, like, it works punk and fast punk or thrash or whatever. But so yeah, man, they all the things that you've talked about in previous previous episodes was definitely popping. Even in my age group in the Blue Mountains, there was punks. There was a lot of punk skaters, hip hop, metal, alternative lifestyle.
Is there places to skate? You're skating people's, like, I'm guessing that in the mountains there's not a whole lot of skate spots. There's only like a few skate parks and maybe some backyard ramps and that sort of thing.
It was really bad. So I think that was, again, you were very thankful to have a good spot because there were just no really. You got kicked out of places. There was no skate parks.
No skate parks at all?
Not really. Look, Katuma had a skate park, but it was fairly mediocre at one stage. I didn't really go up to it, to be honest, in my early years of skateboarding.
Schools, maybe?
We used to go to school. There were a couple of nice schools, like primary schools, that like had nice stair sets. Actually, when I think about it, there were actually a couple of good, like, we would get kicked out sometimes, but there were good skating schools around. But we, in Springwood, which, as I said, was mid-mountains, the top level car park in Springwood was sort of, there was never really enough cars to fill the whole car park out. So the top level, which I think people by virtue just didn't want to go to because out of laziness, was basically free. So it became sort of this tug of war with the council as to who really owned that TL. People would go put a kicker there, put a flat bar there, put a box. It would sort of last a few weeks. Then the council would take it, and then we'd break into the council chambers, put it back.
Really?
And then it'd just go back. And then I think enough time and money was wasted where they hit a truce and were just. I don't remember these rules ever being said or that there was anything that anyone signed, but it was just like, if you put the shit away, they won't take it.
Oh, yeah.
So if you kind of hid it in the corner and just stacked it like hard rubbish, you kind of knew the council wouldn't take it.
But they didn't get to the point where they're going to give you a skate park, though.
No, like that was a long ways off. It was still pretty stigmatized. It was still looked at as a dirty, junky, druggy
even with the artistic sort of creative people a bit higher
Well,
up?
as again, like I wasn't really in that higher parts of the Blue Mountains. I was in Springwood, which was fairly just like your sort of blue collar working class rural suburban area. So it took maybe, I was explaining this to my son. We had to petition to the council for years, and it maybe took 10 years before they put the first. I think it was Glenbrook was the first skate park, and that was like I was like 18, 20 partying music, like not really skateboarding by the time it came. As we kind of like invested in the future generations by default.
Same thing happened in a lot of areas. St Kilda, I remember Renton Miller was campaigning for so long to get one around like Port Phillip, and eventually it came like 7 years ago. But most of us are too old. He's still skating, but he's not in that area anymore. But it's good to see that some of the younger kids can get some of these. Can reap the rewards of the past generations campaigning.
Of somebody else's labour.
That's it.
So yeah, and then I think eventually Springwood did get a park. I've never skated it, and maybe there's more there. I haven't been to the Blue Mountains in a minute. So but yeah, it was this sort of weird DIY. You make stuff. A lot of the older skaters had become chippies and tradies, so they were knocking together, DIY quarters and welding quarters. And there was a place called La Meisha, which Joe knew was rapped about in his tunes. It's a basketball court, and then there was a bit of a weird tug of war between the basketballers and the skaters as to who owned it. The basketballers would get shitty if they rocked up and it was just covered in shit. So the council, I think at that stage, had actually made a pen for us to keep our stuff in.
Oh,
and so there was a weird truce where as long as you kept it in the pen and closed it, it was all like that sort of fenced off area. That was the closest I had to a skate park at that time.
Yeah, so kids take it for granted these days, don't they?
Oh, my son, man, he just doesn't know.
He doesn't know. So you're listening to hip hop and you're watching it in skate videos, and then is the next progression that you think, okay, I'm going to try my hand at it, or is that come a little bit later in the piece?
I was pretty quick to give it a crack. I've always been fairly confident to pick up an instrument, particularly a foreign instrument, and just fiddle around with it, trial it out, and just sort of work my way through the nuances of whatever that instrument is. I've always enjoyed that. I don't even care what the instrument, whether it's like a clarinet or a violin or a new drum kit or a new guitar. I love just sitting there and sort of just finding my way through a new musical experience. So when I started to like rapping, of course, I had enough cockiness and I guess
you backed
arrogant machismo to just go, I got this.
Yeah. Which is a large part of rapping. It's being confident.
Yeah, unfortunately, I had enough of that there to kick it off. And I keep referencing Joe. Joe was the only dude I knew who was rapping.
And he's a bit older.
He was 5 years older, so he was the guy that I just latched onto him. His girlfriend at the time lived on my street, and we sort of knew each other, had mutual friends. He could freestyle like an absolute demon, and I just trailed in his wake for a couple of years before we both started to take it more seriously, I guess.
Yeah, and that. So you form a crew then? Is that what you're like? So you're doing a few little recordings? Do you actually form a crew and say, look, we're going to give this sort of a little crack?
Not quite. Like it came pretty slow. Like Joe, because he was older, he was going up to actual gigs and like jazz funk fusion nights, drum and bass nights, hip hop DJ nights at a space called Tresselli's in Katoomba. He was always coming back to sort of like backyard parties and then relaying the stories to me, and I was just getting super jelly as some like sort of 14, 15-year-old kid, knowing that I probably wouldn't get in. I was tall, so I was thinking maybe I'd get in. Like I was sneaking into a few pubs at the time. I hope my kids aren't watching this later. And so like I was getting around to a few little bars underage, and I thought maybe I could get up there and do some shows, but I don't know, I was a bit shook about it. And then he just sort of announced to me one day that he was in a crew. And I was just like, it all transpired sort of relatively quick, unbeknownst to me. Behind my back, he had just gone and made a crew with another rapper and two DJs. And then they were very quick to sort of start having gigs. So it's like it transpired that he and I were this unofficial duo. And then
But was it because you were underage? You're like, man, you can't have this kid. We're
well,
sneaking him in. We're doing
pretty
real
much,
gigs.
I think that was the conversation that would have taken place. He would have been like, "Oh, I'm knocking around with this dude," and they'd be like, "He's 15," and they had a youth center gig, and I think everyone in the crowd would just Skatermates and play. There's like 7 people there or whatever, and then he invited me up, and I just tried to kick the most blistering.
To prove to him.
Metaphysical, lyrical, miracle madness, and then afterwards, they came up and they're like, "Oh, you can be in the group. Like it's gonna suck. You're gonna be the little kid, but we'll sort of take you in." That was sort of that took place over about a couple of weeks of meeting up. They expanded it to a 3 MC 2 DJ thing, and that's what became Down Under Beats.
Yeah.
So that was the origin story of that.
And from doing a little bit of research, Down Under Beats is arguably one of the first unearthed winners. Is that correct?
Look,
or where did you fit on?
I think it. Look, I don't know the specifics of it. I think they touted it for a bit, or some people did, as being the first unearthed. But I think Illzilla might have got in there earlier. But it was at that stage they had just split it that year into 2 winners. So previously, before that, I think there was 1 big winner.
So unearthed and unearthed high.
Yeah,
is that how they?
I'm not sure. So I think it used to be like a much more of we're going to put all of our eggs into this one artist.
Okay. Yep.
So then I think to save their misstep, if they picked the wrong one, they're like, well, now here's 2 artists. And so they picked a punk band and they picked us. They had a punk hip hop thing again. They had a punk band and an Australian hip hop group. So it was we had only been together in like officially formed for like 2 years before that happened. So it was all everything once that progression kicked off moved pretty quickly.
And what are you, as a bit of a nerd for old equipment, what are you using to record? Like, have you got like MPCs, or are you using just whatever you get, like Fruity Loops or whatever you can get your hands on?
Because I'm sadly not an equipment nerd. I try to become more of an equipment nerd as I get older and just wipe my own ass and know how to use it. A DAW, a DAW. I don't even know how to pronounce it.
I never knew that either. Is it DAW or DAW?
I just say both to just say potato, whatever. So I'm actually like terrible when it comes to being technically proficient with gear and whatnot. But I know that the setup we were using, even with my lack of knowledge, was like real rudimentary. Like it was digital recorders. I think we may have only been able to do 2 or 3 backups. Like MPCs. I remember if we liked a beat, it would take a long time. We'd have to go and have like a drink up the bar before we could come back and rap on it. Like everything was relatively slow moving, and probably classic hip hop arcade sort of stuff. There's no Serato, I know people would be like, Serato's mega new school, but like it was just none of that sort of. Everything was It's like it was that I was that young and that long ago. I couldn't tell you the specifics of their setup, but it was very, very humble.
But as the rapper, you're not there's 2 DJs in the crew, so you think they're handling most of that production sort of stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. And they were quite a lot older than me. As I said, I was 15. Cody Codex, he was 26 at the time. So like he had been DJing for a minute. They were phenomenal scratch DJs. And they just loved making sort of dusty boom bap. So it was a sick little situation to land in, and I was actually just very appreciative. I tried hunting for producers for quite some time, and there was just nothing there. Like prior to that introduction to Katoomba and Trissellis and the DJs, like I was hunting around at school, and like they were all just eccentric sort of bass players and weird nerdy types who were maybe making like 9 Inch Nailsy type shit. And I'd try to persuade them to sample and loop up a break or something, and they didn't want a bar of it. So by the time I met them, I was just super chuffed to have music with like-minded people that I liked making.
Yeah, and I guess you've got a a whole rhyme book full of stuff to get out there and record as well by that stage.
I did. It's saying absolutely nothing. I was 14, 15, like had nothing really to add to the world.
But that's
other than rhyming words and noises. Yeah.
but that's like, okay, I think it's one of Eddie Murphy's stand-up things. He says when he's 12, he's making jokes about taking a shit because that was his life experience at 12.
100%.
At 14, what else you got to talk about?
I was taking a shit on the mic.
On the mic.
Yeah,
A verbal shit.
A verbal shit, verbal diarrhea, 100%. No, it was a great time. It was a great place, and yeah, it was. You did learn a lot from just having limited resource, I guess. So when I did get eventually a broader expanse of recording availabilities, professional studios, other Serato stuff like that for live shows, it is a good spot to launch off because you remembered like doing a show and not being able to jump.
Yeah.
Because the record would skip and stuff like that, which, when Serato came in, that was a game changer from a live perspective. So just little things like that. That was good.
And so you did a lot of live shows with those guys when you're still underage?
Yeah, like heaps of live shows. So that we were predominantly a live group.
Yeah.
And I have said it before in other interviews, is that was our strength, I reckon. I think some of the best live shows I've ever done in my life were as part of Down Under Beats DUB. So it was a collective to begin with. It was three MCs with occasionally 13th Son will jump in. So you have 3 or 4 or 1, a collective sort of situation. And then we sort of dwindled that down to 2 MCs mainly and 2 DJs. I can edit that one out. But yeah, by the time we had got to Joe and I being the main frontman, we had really cut our teeth on the live scene in Sydney.
You see what works, you see what doesn't work.
Yeah, and we Joe and I are best mates. We'd spent a lot of time ciphering together and freestyling together. By the time we had taken it to the stage, we were just wanting to get it as hype and as dynamic as possible. So yeah, I have very fond memories of that time period, and it taught me a shit ton, especially for live shows.
Yeah. And so where do you go from there? Like, does it evolves to the point where you say, okay, well, look, we're all going to go in our separate ways? Was it a conscious decision to sort of stop doing the DUB thing, or is it?
Yeah, look, we had just sort of gotten to a point that we hadn't been together for, if I look back at it now after making music for 20 years, over 20 years, having a year or 2 under your belt and then winning, the national competition doesn't sound like a real stable mix for any group, particularly if you've got most of the people 20 under. You're limited in your life experience, you're limited in your musical experience, you've then got a turbo thrust of commercialism or pseudo-commercialism behind you. There's expectations to grow rapidly because you've gone from a small 200 venue jazz bar hip hop group from the Blue Mountains, and then you get national exposure, getting played 5 times a day on Triple J. Like there's a huge amount of pressure to follow that up. Where you go with it? Do you make a conscious effort to capitalize on that amount of publicity that you're getting? Yeah. And I certainly felt like, because I thought, shit, I'm going to live off this. Like I was all of 16, 17. I was 17 by the time that kicked in. So like my little 17-year-old brain's like, yeah, man, I'm just going to make money off rap forever. Problem solved.
Problem solved.
I did it. I did it, Mom. Like, and then like, the reality kicks in. It's more than just a competition. There are little parts of it are talent, little parts of it are luck, little parts of it are timing. Then there's how much your crew develop. And so there were a lot of contributing factors, but also, I was starting to get the years after 17 to sort of 21 for a young man, when they grow up a hell of a lot in that time period. So as we sort of extended onto the years of Down Under Beats, and having done it since I was 14, 15 and we're doing nearly a show every 2 weeks, so they're talking hundreds of gigs.
Yep. And you're
And
making some money. Like it's enough
we're
for you to
making
live
like
off.
it wasn't enough to like we could have potentially had it in a way rigged to try and live off it, but it certainly wasn't enough to live off. So there's that key factor in this isn't a reality for paying for your day-to-day bills.
Yep.
This possibly isn't a career. You start to get into relationships and move out and live with girlfriends and try to grow up, and you hit 21, 22 and you feel like you're just the oldest, greyest 50-year-old man on the planet by that stage. Yeah. So I was like, pull your socks up, get a job, get a real job. And plus I just hadn't really tried anything seriously in any other direction. So I wanted to basically kind of hang my boots up at 21.
Retire.
And just be like, I'm done. I want to try something else. I was a tradie and just had moved to the city and just wanting to sort of give it a break for a tick. It was going to hang the boots up at the exact time I basically had people wanting to sign me, which I didn't know about. Right. So yeah.
Do you want to tell us who they were?
Yeah, well, that was mainly when I had worked with Chasm. So Chasm, a producer out of astronomy class, originally from Melbourne, moved to Sydney. I had moved to Sydney and just seen him at a few gigs, and I think I was a bit pissed and just asked him for beats. That was like trying to network. So I walked up to Chasm, hey, give me beats, and then he gave me a beat tape. And then the beats that he gave, I think I picked like 3 or 4 of them, and I just wrote to them. And weirdly enough, I think the mind state was these are going to be your last songs, so make them good. These are going to be
because you had to knuckle down, get a real job.
Well, kind of, yeah. It was kind of like make these something to hang your hat on and then piss off and call it a day. You'll be some rapper that no one ever knew about and forgot about. So if they do unarchive stuff, make sure it's dope or cool, whatever you want to make it. And so like I put an effort into trying to make them nice songs. Tried a few things differently. I was rapping really fast and trying to be quite technical and not being understood, and then slowed it down a little bit and became a bit more intelligible on Chasm's stuff. Walked into a studio with him, like a professional studio for the first time, recorded it, probably felt a bit more confident, probably sounded a little bit better because I was in a nice studio, and thought nothing of it. And then Chasm being signed to Dialectrix with astronomy class, he thought that I think he naturally thought Dialectrix were going to put it out, and for some reason it didn't. And then Obese ended up signing him as a producer.
Yep.
So all this sort of took place in the back of my head while I'm like, you're walking off.
Yeah. So what year are we talking now? So this is
like 06-ish.
Okay. Yeah.
So like by the time we got unearthed in 04, and by the time we're hitting 06, 07, this is when this is taking place.
Yeah.
And he got signed about that time to Obese. And then
at that time, sorry to cut you off, Obese is really, obviously the Hoods have come out, they've done their thing. Aussie hip hop is getting love, so the timing is right in that respect.
Yeah, well, it was. Well, like I think because the timing was right, that's why I was so convinced that the timing was not right for me. Because I was like, if you've given this such a red hot crack before this massive explosion, and you had all of Triple J playing your music, and then all of a sudden you're struggling to get struggling to record, struggling to do shows, whatever, that maybe this wave is sailing without you on it. So that's sort of the partly why I was so resounding like this is done. But yeah, all of those sort of merger with commercialism was really popping in the background. The calling had gone gold, platinum, massive. Other artists were starting to get big. Nesso, and then Dialectrix were doing really well. Hermitude, like the Herd and Hermitude, and everything was they were closely affiliated with the Blue Mountains as well. So it was really the writing on the wall saying, you're not a part of that. You didn't make it. Maybe do it as a passion project sort of thing.
Yep.
But don't take it so seriously. Don't put your eggs in that basket. Get a trade, buy a house, whatever. And then just at that exact time, Chasm gets signed, and then as he's got signed to Obese, Pegs really liked the tunes that I'd done with him. And one of them that I'd done was starting to get J-Play again. So that was like a bizarre little, like he had a single called Don't Let Your Guard Down.
And Elephant Tracks were servicing that to Triple J, or they picked
No,
it
that
up?
was Obese. So he had already been
Oh,
signed.
okay,
He
right.
got signed Obese. He had put out Beyond the Beat tape, and the lead single was the one that I was on. So naturally, Pegs was like sniffing around, saying, "Hey, what's he doing?" I sort of know his past. He distributed the Down on the Beat stuff, so he was familiar with us as a group, and he sort of had was privy to the fact I'd left, and yeah, he kind of just goaded me into doing an album with Chasm and getting signed with Obese. So it took a pretty radical turn of events, like where I went from like I'm not doing this again to holy shit, it's only actually just started. Like,
And you're still living in the Blue Mountains? You're in Sydney now?
no, I was living in Sydney, but I was bouncing back and forth between the mountains a lot at that stage. I was paying rent at two places, one in the mountains, one in Sydney. So that's how much I was going back and forth.
Yeah. And with Obese, the signing and that sort of thing, was there a push to, all right, you're going to move to Melbourne now?
Oh, look, not originally, mate. What had happened was to sort of fast track that time period as the prospect of Chasm getting signed meant that other people affiliated with him were going to get signed. So the Fundamentals were on that as well. So Pegs started sniffing around for the Fundamentals. Pegs was intrigued as to what I was doing. We both eventually get signed to Obese. Tupac was doing a lot of cuts on Chasm's record. So a lot of my, core contemporaries were a part of that project. And then Chasm had a live show was a collective. He's a producer, so to put on his most hype live show, he had myself, Jess one out of Fundamentals, and he had Tupac out of Binge Thinkers. So it was we, by virtue of trailing in the wake of Kaz, we're doing like an unbelievable amount of shows because we all had our other shit on the side as well. Jesse had Fundamentals, I had my solo stuff, and a crew I was working with Joe. Buck had Binge Thinkers, and then we would do Chasm stuff. And sometimes even those different factors would play on the same night. So I think I clocked. I'm trying not to exaggerate, but we're pushing like to about 100 gigs a year.
Wow!
Like it was just like I remember counting them, and not getting to 100, but it was relatively close.
Pushing three figures.
It was north of 50 easily.
Yeah.
Which I know, like when you're hoods and downsides and all that, they might sneeze at that and go, "Will they do 38 tours or whatever?" But for you, like your little knockaround dude who was on the prospect of getting signed and couch hopping and stuff. So I wasn't really in any set location really at that stage because I would. That's why I was paying double rent because I come up and see family or I'll be staying at the house I'm meant to be staying at in the Blue Mountains, but then I'll be staying at Sydney a lot, and then I was traveling like a phenomenal amount at that time period.
So when you are signed to Obese and you know who else they have signed and the juggernaut that they were within Aussie hip hop at that point, did you think, all right, well maybe I don't need a trade. I can give this a good crack here.
I think my experience with the Unearthing made me less naive than some of the other people.
Yeah,
I was seeing them approach it like that, and to be honest, some of them took that outlook and made it a reality. Some of them, like the Fundamentals, they live off music.
Yeah,
they pay their mortgage off music, so they very much did it. But I think the realization came with me having already had commercialism come to me at a young age, seeing it, something like getting signed by OB. So I was more just happy to be a part of a label and a legacy of stuff that I respected.
Yep.
So I had huge respect for the albums that they had put out. They were the type of music that I wanted to make. Yep. There's some of the stuff that I made prior to getting signed with Obese was quite dusty and underground and probably could fit better on like Pang or Broken Tooth or more of an indie label. But I really did like the quality and the qualities of the music that the artists on Obese were doing. That was where I wanted to be. Yep. So I was just stoked to be a part of that family. Less so than actually pushing it. I probably had the chance get a job then.
Yeah.
And just I was scared to take it seriously enough, but in case maybe it failed, or just like, there was a certain amount of there was a certain amount of the mainstream coming towards me without having to do too much, and my fear would be with that wave would stop, and then I would have to start going towards it and
make music that you didn't want to make because you were sort of
just being
halfway
mindful of that, even with getting unearthed. Like we're like, what do we do next? What did they like about that song that got played? Do we concernedly go for it? It was like, no. Well, do we do something that has integrity? But fuck, we don't want to blow the national radio play that we're getting, because that's good for gigs. So we wanted to split that difference between trying to grow as a brand and trying to grow as a group without stepping in the directions that you think is not good.
Yeah.
So here you are again, signed to the biggest independent label in music history, or the biggest independent label in rap music history in the country, and you're serviced with the same sort of fork in the road. Eventually, to begin with, Obese were just so powerful that they would just flood a fan base to you. It went from no fans to 200 at a show, like that.
Yeah. But that was the era where they could do no wrong. They sort of had the Midas touch in that. Just being backed by them gave you a certain amount of credibility.
I would have, at that time, if they signed someone, I would have just bought it. Yeah. If it was MC ABC and I walked into JB or wherever, or Soul Clap or Next Level, and it said Obese ABC rapper, I'll go, I know this is good. Yeah, just grab it.
I used to drive past and see on the shop, you'd see like we're launching this album, you'd see it painted on the window. You'd be like, all right, that's what I'm looking at.
Yeah, like it had at a time. For me, I'm talking purely for me.
Yeah,
it had a very solid reputation. People, there's certain brand strengths like Toyota and Toyota Prados that just charge silly money just based on their brand reputation. And at that stage, at that age of my life with Obese, they could do no wrong for me. So to get signed by them at that stage was just like.
And releasing that first solo record, how did you feel about that? Obviously, it's a big weight off your shoulders, and it's something that you wanted to do, and it got pushed really well by them. You got good distribution. Were you happy with how that also sort of panned out?
I was very happy. Look, I was probably at one of the most focused points in my life creatively. So I was single in a house in the Blue Mountains, massive panoramic view into this beautiful view of the eucalyptus trees or whatever. I had no kids. Like, I love my kids, but I had no kids. And I was just working in a bakery with Joe, so the dude I rap with. We'd knock off work at like 1 in the afternoon. We'd work from like 5 to 1, and just live the bohemian rap dream. Just punching darts, drinking coffee, making tunes. Like, it was really a beautiful time to be alive. It was just really easy to write that record because there was a lot of content I couldn't put into a group scenario. So I had that opportunity to do more personalized content and had quite a lot of it there. People were saying being a solo artist would be more difficult. You'd have to produce more songs. You'd have to have a bigger workload. But I found it pleasantly surprising.
Yeah. And then after that, then you've got the daunting sort of prospect of a second album.
Yeah, well, I was actually talking to Buck about this. I think they call it sophomore syndrome. I didn't think I had sophomore syndrome, but like, I was hungry. By the time I had done that swift turnaround and was like, you sign Obese, you're doing shit tons of gigs. I was like, I want to make a splash now. I'm going to do shitloads of collabs. I'm gonna write and do as much as I could. So we did Chasm's Down Under Beats record 06, the second LP. Then Chasm I contributed to his solo album, which was 07. It came out 08. Wrote the first solo D-Trix, which came out 08 as well. Then the next year was Pegs. I'm moving quickly through the catalog.
Yeah.
Pegs is like, I want to start a group.
Gully Platoon.
And he's like, I want to do Gully Platoon. So the next year we did that. And then
And that would have been cool because you got to bring Joe along for that.
Pegs was like, he's like, I want to start a crew. You want to be in it? We sort of loosely alluded to that. And I was like, I'm going to start a crew with Joe. If we're doing stuff, I'm gonna do shit with him as well. So that ended up becoming that in 09. Then the sophomore was 2010. So you're looking like 5 albums, like one a year, if not two, for 4 or 5 years. So like I was already like at 21, that area, going, oh, like I'm burnt out. I'm gonna hang up my boots, and then you pump out 5 albums a year with anywhere from say maybe 20 to 80 shows a year. So like by the time I hit that second one, I was like, it was a lot of things going on too. Like I think by that stage, the experience, the shows, getting a good taste for the industry, like getting a good actual nosedive into what the music industry was starting to affect me adversely. I think not just gigs or partying, but just the nature of the music industry when you really see it, and you're not like I like pop music, man. I'll say it to anyone. Like I love pop music. I appreciate the art of a pop tune or a well-written chorus. I don't think it needs to be on everything. I don't think every song needs a chorus, and I certainly respect underground music and really strange music as well. So I've got a fairly eclectic range of tastes. But I'm not adverse to pop. And I'm not adverse to people being famous or earning money, but then when you see the gross underbelly slowly filtering its way into something that you consider very dear, and your artistic integrity and stuff starts to get tainted or drawn into question, I was inadvertently beefing with people that I didn't want to from just being too loose. Other artists and people you thought were mates then become your competitors, and just all that sort of stuff really started to pop around the second LP.
Yeah.
So there was almost like I was too scared to do a personal album at that stage because I probably didn't want to say the things I wanted to say.
You didn't want to put them on record.
I didn't want to bite the hand that feeds me. Like I didn't want to say I'm having a shit time or that I'm not enjoying gigs.
So with Obese in that prime period where they are doing no wrong and everything basically that they touch is going to Triple J and getting some strong rotation. Yeah. Is there talk about, do they guide you in a way like this needs to be more poppy, this is going to be a single, this is something that's going to get play, you need to do this, blah blah blah? Does that happen?
No, not. I think the thing with Obese is there was definitely a transition of artists. So like you could say we were the second gen of Obese. I don't think they really got to a third gen. Maybe we were the third gen, pardon me. Like the first OGs were your Bias, your Brad Struts, your Reasons, and then maybe the second gen was the enormously successful batch of your Hoods, Drafts, your Funkors, Downside was on it, Listen SO was on it. Like if you had all of them on the label right now, so need I say more about how successful that batch was? And then there was this sort of exodus period where they were kind of leaving for whatever reasons they were, and then new ones were filling in. And I was part of that movement and really was quite naive and too young and too passive to understand of those shifts and how powerful those shifts were.
And how much big business has become. Like you're talking big sales now, and it's not just a little record store.
The names I just mentioned are some of the most successful artists in Australian music history.
Full stop.
So no genre. Like it just, so you're trailing in that wake. I kind of knew at the time that's what they were, but that's the shoes you're meant to fill. There's a certain amount of tension that can possibly come your way from that. Yeah. I was just so blind, literally,
by drinking.
From drinking too much. Don't drink; it's bad for you.
Product placement.
But in all honesty, it all those things which I've never really spoken about much because I didn't really feel like that I should have been drawn into that gravitational pull. But by default of being signed to Obese and being in a group with pegs, you're pretty silly if you don't think that some of whatever politics are going on, whether it be artist to artist or artist label, if you looking back now as an older dude with kids and a bit more business acumen and savviness and world smarts or whatever, I could see that could be a pretty tumultuous environment for someone who's just getting signed. And I was totally ignorant to a lot of it going on.
Yeah.
So by the time I had hit Gully Platoon and made that record, I was touring too much, drinking too much, too unhealthy, just totally about just rapping, just rap, and not in a particularly good way. Probably burning myself out, just writing raps after raps after raps, just thinking this is the time to get it in, not quality over quantity. I was probably not really taking that too much into consideration.
Yeah.
And then by the time I had hit the second solo LP, which as I said was like after a 5-year streak of an album a year, I just wanted to do something that was gonna sort of transport me back to a musical feeling of why I liked music. So it wasn't like I was going, I'm going to make it less poppy or less radio friendly or any of that sort of stuff. But I think the album was not as I said, my contemporaries and label mates were starting to go have bigger hooks, have more singers on them, have electro sounding production, and mine was going dustier and in a different direction. So I enjoyed just doing a self-serving album that it wasn't saying too much personally about what I was thinking or feeling, because I just didn't really want to express it that much.
But you did, when you say you weren't going down that route, you still did get some Triple J love from that second one.
Well, they gave me quite a lot of love for that second one. And so it's like, if you got all of my Triple J songs and put them together, there's like an hour's set of only Triple J songs.
Yeah. Which is like, it means that you could sell out some shows.
Well, it could, which is, a good point. I think what I started to understand is that it's not the radio play doesn't give you a career. I think there was a very common misconception that you do a catchy, funky Aussie hip hop Triple J song, gets played on the J's, and then the snowboarders and skaters come out and they get frothed. And they get frothed. You pack out 500 people at $20 a head, and you crunch the numbers, and then bang, you've got a career. It's not like that.
Yeah,
it's just simply not like that. You need more than a Triple J song. You need more than a sellout show. There is a certain synergy between those two things that you have to work very hard for them to mechanically move together.
But it definitely doesn't hurt. It helps.
Absolutely does not hurt. Does not hurt. But at a certain point, having said that, it can be detrimental if you've got a radio tune here, you got a radio tune there, and you got a radio tune there, and you got a radio tune there, and your average punter doesn't know the name of the artist who did that. They're not going to see your branding and associate you with those songs. You need to make a concerted effort. You need to be clever with it, or at least approach it like, you put it this way: if I wrote all of my albums to be Triple J songs, I would be living off music.
Yeah,
it's more than just one. You need that one song to introduce an audience to you, and they go, "Hey, this is such and such artist," and they go, "Oh, I want to check out more," and then they go, "Bang, bang, bang," and the whole album is that.
Yep.
That is in my humble opinion, the definitive difference between someone who is going to live off music at that stage,
yep,
and someone who wasn't. And I knew I was not going to do that. So I kind of knew, even though they were giving me mad love, and I was able to, like, it was not uncommon for me to do a show and someone come up and go, "I love your music. I know every single song that you just played, but I don't know what your name is."
Really?
Like, that was not uncommon.
Yeah.
There was a time where I played with, Jay from Triple J and the Doctor in the morning at a friend's of Rom. We did a show at the Snow, and I finished off the tune. I'm like, oh, you might know the song from Triple J. And then I finished my set, and I walked off, and he goes, "What, you mean your whole set?" Like he was, making fun of the fact that the entire set was J songs. But if we were going to play at a staunch hip hop night, where you're playing with Lazy Grey or Trem, or we played stand up with the whole in 2014, and every underground artist who's worth anything was on that lineup. Like we still played the J songs, but we also did our rap show. So it was hard to bridge and straddle all these different scenes and not really belong officially to one of those scenes.
Yeah, and I guess you've got your core Aussie hip hop fans that think, you look at like say someone like 360, they go, well, he's just making radio tunes now, so they forget about all the stuff that he did previous to that.
Yeah, well, like he's just like, well, screw all those other scenes. I want electro dance youth people.
Yeah.
Where I just didn't like, they isolated their disciplines or their motives. Where I just never did that, and that it can be. I know that was the reason why, if in a career sense, it was going to be unstable and non-profitable. But I just didn't care.
Yeah.
Well, I just didn't like. I had a sort of self-sabotaging kamikaze attitude of like, I just don't care.
I was gonna say a bit of self-sabotage before, but you brought it up.
No, it was definitely self-sabotaging, because I think a part of that too is fear of, well, then if I try really hard and I try to be commercial and I fail, I'm going to look like an idiot. So there's sort of, I think the person who chooses to go the pop route, boosts himself with trepidation, going, well, I just chose that and I just don't care about the haters or the what it is. It's not that I care about people's perspective. It's just that I like a broad range of music, and I didn't want to taper it or bottle it. And I guess back to your question earlier, did Obese ever say craft your records in this way? Never. They said make the record you want, but Pegs was more like be professional, like get your merch game up, have your merch ready, don't be fucking pissed at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Like he was pushing me to treat it like a job.
So you guys so you'd own your merch as well, like that was all money in your pocket?
Yeah, like they ran it like there was no 360 deals. There were whispers of potentially going down that route, and to be honest, I probably would have taken that. I would have possibly benefited a lot more from that as a younger artist if I had someone who was constantly taking care of merch, constantly taking care of publishing syncs, like all of that stuff. If I didn't have to manage that stuff myself, or hunt those people out myself, it potentially could have been done better. But by the time there was like sort of whispers and talks of it, I had already ran my merch for quite a long time, and it's like I didn't want to give that up anymore.
Yeah, which is cool though. And that's the way now that 90% of musicians, or I'm generalising, that aren't huge would make them their bank.
It's a huge revenue stream for sure. And it's just, if you want to make money off music, you can do it. Like I think the younger gen have really proved that without radio play, is that there's ways of filling out shows and making money without radio. Like it's just not necessary as it once was.
Yeah, it's funny because we always talk about Triple J, and you need to do it, but obviously people like Cursor have proved that you don't need to do it, and you've got other people that are hung up on, well, there is no radio play in Australia, but I think that's just the way that it is. People have still made it regardless of that. It's unfortunate that we only have that as a one medium that actually will play independent kind of music.
Yeah, I think we're probably yet to see it. And I'm talking out of place because I don't really know a huge amount of the topic I'm about to talk on, but I know that younger kids now can become an influencer or a YouTuber or a content creator, and then just very swiftly take their whatever momentum they've gained through that and shuffle it completely into something else.
Yeah,
I'm just going to sound so old and stupid. I think there was a YouTuber, was an Angry Frank, who turned into Joji. I'm going to sound stupid for the people who actually know that story, but someone I was working with, he's like, man, you got to check out this YouTube clip, and it was someone doing funny jackass-esque. He's dressed in like a suit, and he looks really dumb and stupid, and he's like singing some dumb song. It looked like something off CKY Jackass.
Yeah.
And then he's like, he comes out after millions of followers and being a parody act, and he's just like, I've got bad depression and I did all this stuff to cure my mental health, but I actually want to make sad emo EDM. And he makes like beautiful, sad emo EDM and clocks like tens of millions of hits. So he's just going,
That's
take it.
pivoting fucking.
But I'm pretty sure that Lil Nas X dude did the same thing. Like, as I said, I'm talking at a place about something I know very little of. But
Yeah.
what I'm saying is, I know enough of it, and I can see the concept broadly enough that my kids could possibly start out going like, I'm a basketballer. Here's my basketball channel. Here's me. But actually, now I'm making pizzas, and I'm a home pizza movie maker, and then catapult that into being a boxer like the Logan Paul stuff. And the prime, like I can see that it's gone beyond music and radio play and TikTok. It's just I guess you can just get life followers of your essence of whoever you are, and then just transplant them completely into something else.
Look, I totally agree. I think it's an interesting time now where you still have to have a passion about something. I think when kids say, I just want to be an influencer, you're like, that's great, but influence what? Like, you've got to fucking know what you're talking about and talk about something, find your niche, and then try and be a fucking power that be in that field,
Yeah. I think it's possible. I'm starting to try and be more open-minded when my kids say, I want to be a YouTuber.
Yeah. That's what every kid wants.
I want to start a YouTube, because I'm starting to understand that it's going to be a part of their creative evolution. If I was 12 or 13 and wanted to rap, I would probably be immediately on SoundCloud with beats that I could download. So going back to the Blue Mountains where I said I couldn't get beats and people were drum and bass or 9 Inch Nails producers and stuff, I'd probably find beats immediately. I'd put all my shitty lyrical miracle raps straight onto SoundCloud. I just didn't have that opportunity there to screw up in that way. So it's like I've got to be a little bit more, when I'm thinking about my kids and the next gen of people coming through, when they say, I just want to be a YouTuber, I think that's just a synonym for saying, I want to perform.
Yeah.
Like if you were younger and you said, I want to be a performer when you get older, no one would chastise you. But I think we have the stigma of YouTuber is just something that's dumb. There might be someone who comes out and makes beautiful art as an anonymous YouTuber, and we just go, holy shit, this person's like a modern day Picasso or Mozart, and they just are doing YouTube videos. I'm not. Maybe there's a very high probability with the amount of people on YouTube that currently exists right now. But I certainly don't know about it or go looking for it. But I have faith that the other generations after, we're talking about Triple J and making it without radio play, there will be huge artists that just go straight to huge through YouTube without possibly being a content creator, YouTuber or whatever.
It's interesting because you see like people on TikTok who get millions of followers and then they don't really know what to do with them, and they're like, I need to sell merch, I need to be a comedian. There are these people that might make a few viral videos and they try and pivot that into some sort of longevity career, and that's obvious when you see that people do that. And I think you just need to know what you're talking about first before you try and be that personality that you
and just honesty, or like maybe I think the filter, we have so much media thrown at us, so much people yelling at you permanently. I think our mental gauge to turn off, our sort of the apathy behind the eyes and ears is just goes, I'm just going to turn that off right now. And also, if with so much advertising and so much stimulus coming at you, your brain is so quick to go, that's fake. Like you see something epic happen, you go, oh, Photoshop. Or staged. A guy goes to snatch a girl's bag, but she turns around and kicks him in the head. It's like, oh, that's crazy. It's not real. Like that transition from being excited to it's fake is probably less than a second. So it's I think people's gauge of sincerity is so sharp, and I think people don't understand how if something is just genuine and feels honest and sincere, it immediately goes like massively viral. Or maybe not all the time, but a huge contributing factor to things going viral. It's just like just seeing things that are genuine because everything's so staged.
Yeah, I think that your chances of something going viral is a lot stronger if it's not staged. If it's just organically happens. If someone falls over and it's funny, that's better than someone pretending to fucking fall.
So I think the problem with these younger kids, and I'm talking about my kids or future generations of artists in general, is they've got this ability to be monitored 24/7, and the knowledge that people are watching them, that they need to behave like nobody's watching them, which is if they figure that out, well, then they start to become like these other celebrities who are popping up from those mediums. Like if they're like, I want people to watch, but I'm just going to pretend like the camera's not there. And dance like man, I'm not really a Drake fan, but I see the way he dances, and I'm like, that guy does not give a shit, man. Like he dances like a chicken. Like I believe that's what he does behind closed doors. I feel like you can say what you want about Drake. I believe he wants to dance like a chicken.
Chicken.
Like the weird, I actually believe that's what he wants to do in life. I don't think he went into a corporate room and went, hit me with the hottest dance, and they stood up and started dancing like with the Wii controller meme. I genuinely believe that comes from his soul, that chicken dance. So yeah, man, I don't know. I've gone on a massive rant.
We've gone on a rant. All right, so we did go on a bit of a tangent then, but we've brought it back. We're back here.
We've regathered.
But we still have to touch on, in that point of your musical career, Aussie hip hop was at a huge high point. Like you're on a track on whose album was it? It was M-Phase's album, and that won an ARIA, and that's big for Aussie hip hop in general.
Yeah, there was there was hooking up with M-Phases was it was a big thing because he was a huge producer at the time. He was coming up. He had a buzz. As he said, he won the ARIA for that album. When he hit me up to do that track, I just sort of sent him he sent me a beat that I wasn't really expecting. He's got a I think in his book he said, I hung out with Dialectrix and he rapped over every one of my beats, so I didn't know what to send him. So he sent me something that I felt was R&B-ish, for lack of a better term.
Yeah.
And the only way I could rap on it was doing it double the speed. Sent it to him, and he changed it into the Facilitator, which was one of the what people were responding to off the album, off the ARIA winning album, was the 9 High track, the Mantra track, and the one that I was on. So that became the opener for pretty much every show after that. So it was a cool thing that him bringing me on board for that album became the Kickstarter to pretty much every live show I've ever done.
Which is cool because
it became the intro tune.
And that's cool because it's not even really your song. Obviously, you're on it, but
true.
It is cool and it's diverse that you can not play all your own album tracks when you go and do a gig.
Yeah, 100%. And it's like I reckon I've claimed that more than him. Like 100%. I reckon that more people have heard that at a D-Trix show than they've ever heard at a Phases show.
Yeah, it's not strange, but it's interesting when producers and DJs release albums because obviously they're not generally the ones that are doing the vocals. So it speaks a lot. If he wants you to be on that song, then it means that he highly regards you to speak for him, if that makes sense.
He actually put on a good live show for that too. So again, going back to what we were talking about, like the burnout was starting to you're getting more burnout factor in there when you're doing like Phases shows as well. He had a cool show with like a huge chunk of the artists he had on there. But no, like going back to that period you're talking about and getting specific with where we're talking, everything was really starting to pick up. Like his album did well. He was producing Illy's album. Illy's was getting a lot of radio play. He was growing as an artist, and
I don't think anyone from Aussie hip hop world has got more Triple J love than Illy. Maybe the Hoods, but that's about. I think Illy gets it.
Yeah, he was getting successful. Fundamentals were like slowly. I was talking before about that mechanism between radio play and shows. That they had that on lock. Like there were points where the Fundamentals were doing sold out back-to-back shows more than bigger artists than them, and a lot of bigger artists were sitting there going, "Hey, what's going on here?"
And their merge game was strong too.
Everything that they were doing was strong. You know, like if the reason that they became so successful that they could do it for full-time jobs is because even at those early stages, at that 2009 area where we've all released our first records, we're going into our second records. It's 2009, 2010. All of those artists are all starting to pick up. That second, third gen of obese artists are really starting to get traction. They're selling out shows, they're selling records, they're getting on festivals, they're doing all the things that people wanting to make music a career are doing. But Fundamentals in particular, you may not like their music, and sometimes they go in a direction. It's not a direction that I would go in. They know that, but they're like my best friends. I grew up with them in the Blue Mountains. They're my blood.
Their ability to write a catchy song and a good hook is pretty fucking good.
So,
man.
like, we've always known what our musical persuasions are. They would know me intimately enough to know that I'd just be a mule and hit that, and I'm not going to do that. And I would know that they're naturally inclined to want to entertain people live. Their albums are structured to do that. So they were popping off. They were getting really popular. The whole of the scene was really starting to take off. You mentioned 360. He was starting to, hit his stratosphere of pop viability.
Yep.
You mentioned Cursor before. He was starting to get his underground battle rap on and was just starting to.
Well, he was originally signed to Obese.
He was on a distribution management thing. So, but like all of those artists were really starting to, as we go into the sort of 20 teens, if you want to call it that, they were all starting to move and gravitate, and yeah, like it was a pretty healthy time for that sort of scene.
Yeah, and I guess with that sort of success comes some pretty cool sort of bills that you could do working with international artists and that sort of stuff. Do you want to talk about some of your favorite support slots that you did?
We had a really good run of doing international slots, so we got to support, and when I say we, it was like Buck, myself, and other people who were helping out doing the sort of hype man duties. But in amongst that time period, I got to support Doom. I got to support
did you get to meet him properly?
I didn't get to meet him properly. Like the show itself, we were on pretty early, and it was a like Buck is a massive Doom fan. Like he's named one of his kids after a Doom alias. Like he's deep. Like he was geeking hard that night, and we had a really great night. It was like the night itself was amazing, but at the time when I had gone on, the Metro was like it was full, but those international slots, they're there to see. Most of them aren't even into local sort of stuff. But it was good to flex what you have to give to those sort of people who aren't really responding to it that well, and trying
win them over potentially.
Win them over. Like I remember doing that show, and even though we had a great night and we got to support Doom, we're on the same roster and everything. And now my son is a massive Doom fan, which is like he didn't believe me. And I'm like, yeah, I supported MF Doom. Like,
you need the poster at home.
And I'm like, yeah, you can check it on my Wikipedia page. But and then he did, and he's like, man, oh my god. But like at the time of performing that show, it was like, people were doing that sort of standing there watching you sort of thing, and then I felt like maybe we hadn't won them over, and I was a bit unsure. And then I remember going up to my manager at the time, and I'm like, oh, I don't know if these international supports are working or worth it or whatever. But then we had a crazy night anyway, so that made it worth it.
Yeah.
But and then the reviewer for that show just wrote like the most massively praising article about our show. So awesome. It's just like sometimes you don't. I think it was interesting that you don't know, even though people aren't running around and throwing their hands up or being loud or responding in the way that you think they are. Like this journalist went back and wrote really nice stuff about what we did. So that was kind of cool and a learning experience. But most of them were like you love the fact you're on the bill with those artists that you love, but they're a bit of a mission to win their audience over. And sometimes I liked that mission, and sometimes it's just like, like there are other. I'm not going to mention artists. There are friends of mine who have jumped up on international slots that have probably not been built the right way, and there've been like bottles thrown at them,
Really?
and food, and the artists will remain anonymous, but they know who they are. They're my mates. It's good. It's in the past, mate. It's in the past. But yeah, like even with Ghostface, like I was walking on.
Was that the SB show?
No, that was in Sydney. I can't even remember the venue off the top of my head, but yeah, like that was just a weird show. Like I was walking backstage, and I think Ghost done sound check, and we're about to head on to do our thing. And I was walking through this dark roped off area, and I walked through and like hit a wall, and then bounced off. And it wasn't a wall; it was a Ghostface Killer.
And was he cool?
I just bounced off him. I just went. The dude is a big dude, man.
Yeah.
Like I'm not small, but I felt very small bouncing off him. So that was a funny. And he didn't say anything. He just mean mugged me and walked off.
Really?
Yeah. No. Like, hey, how are? It was just like, yeah. It was cold. Cold face killer. But, no, that was still dope to do. But I think that out of all of them, RZA was the one where going back to that winning the crowd over thing. Everything ran a bit late, so usually you're on quite a fair bit prior to the main act. You do your thing, hardly anyone's there, or people are stonewalling you or whatever. And then that ran late, and then ran so late that we played right in front of RZA. So he was like side of stage. He could see everything. I was pretty intimidated with the nasally tone and my Aussie raps. And then
did you get a few head nods from him?
Well, he was going to stand there just watching, taking everything in, and then I'm telling the story totally wrong. His crew were there. He was not there. That's a critical fact. His crew were there, and they were kind of like just eyeing me off for a bit, and I wasn't sure if they were liking it or hating it. And then as we were packing up after the RZA's show, which was really cool, I loved it. He played Gravedigger stuff, and he's just like sitting there with a glass of wine at one stage, sort of like just talking his raps. So it was a really intimate show. He packs up all his stuff, and then he's like, "Yo, you the kid who got that flow? My boys told me you got that flow." He's like, "Come hang out with me and my wife and have a few drinks." So I was like, "All right, let's go hang out with the Woo." And then and we just sat there and we're drinking like Hennessy, talking to the RZA for like 3 or 4 hours post show.
Amazing.
So his homeboys really dug the show. I think they were dudes out of Sons of Man or something. And his DJ watched it and he's just like, "Yeah, that dude's like good." And he's like, "Yeah, come back with us." And
did he ask you to rap or anything?
No, man. I was just trying hard and just to keep my composure and not say anything stupid and just enjoy being pretending I'm part of the Woo.
Just being in the moment.
Just let me pretend for a little bit. But yeah, again, I'll keep some anonymity to it. Like one of the people who I was performing with who will remain anonymous. Like about at the 3 hour mark, after a few drinks, just started jumping up and screaming Wu-Tang and just like couldn't hold the woundness anymore. And, and he's just like woo, ah, woo, ah, and I'm like, "Yeah, we gotta go." And I just like grabbed it, like walked off. But I got to kick it with the RZA for a bit. That was definitely.
Did you snap a photo?
I didn't snap a photo. I got a photo with the Jizza at a Woo show. When I snuck backstage to that one, I wasn't performing on that one, but yeah, chilling with RZA is definitely a career highlight.
Yeah,
like 100% a highlight.
Yeah, and that's from a live perspective. What about like who's a highlight who you've worked with, or someone who you think that you've done a track with, collaborated with, whether it's a producer, whether it's another rapper, who's someone that you think is like that's a sort of something that you hold pretty high and dear?
It's a very good question. There's a few. Like I'll spout off a few. Doing something with Pegs to begin with, when we did a track on Chasm's one, was like straight bucket list material for me. He was the dude that I was was getting a lot of my inspiration, a lot of my influences from. He had developed a level of sort of complexity and flow that I wanted to match. I was either too crowded with my spacing or my words, and or I was too sparse. I hadn't quite mastered how to get the density of writing at a level that I thought he had. So I was using him. I was using Delta. I was using Nas. I was using all these people who'd sort of mastered trem, mastered the cadence and the amount of syllables and the way that they would space them.
And negative space.
Negative space, where to put your breaths. So I really studied those guys when I was trying to stop rapping quick and do wiggity stuff. And Pegs was at the forefront of a lot of things, of a lot of techniques that I adopted, like straight out of his book. He sort of said he recognized that, and that's why I sort of blipped on his radar. He could see I'd taken things out of his book and then tweaked them my own way. So for him to then turn around and say, I want to do a track with you, that was really cool. Yeah. And then eventually we became crew and did a bunch of other stuff. But the first one was a huge milestone. Producer-wise, working with Plutonic Lab was the same. Like he was just, in that era of the early 2000s, he had just a spate of just win.
People that have been on this show will get it.
Yeah, he had Muffin Plutonic, Hunger Pains. He had Axis. They were like back to back. They were like a year apart. Like so, they were like really. And then all of his earlier stuff, the stuff he had done on Nuff Said, like so working with Pluto, period, let alone over 2 albums, was definitely in that category.
Yep.
We hopefully will work together again, but we've done a lot of work together. He's in his lane, I'm in my lane. I'd love to reconnect with him and get some more stuff done, but like just being on the caliber to be accepted from him was insane. So they're sounding like they're pretty like in the camp of like I was just geeked out in the camp I was in to begin with, so that they were both really big things to tick off. But then on an international front, we're probably looking at Apollo Brown. So getting on a track with Apollo Brown was cool. We got to hang out, which was in the day and age of just file sharing. You think with something like that, you're just going to get your beats or your 2 or 3 beats and then fill it in. So it was good to kick it with him in Melbourne, hang out with him for half a day. I actually got a lot out of just hanging with Apollo Brown. He did some things that changed my perspective, just on rapping a bit. Like you do that classic, like what's your favorite rapper? Sure, like what do you say to some American dude that you don't know who you respect?
So who did you say?
Well, it got to the point where I think we were just kicking it. We went around, got some food, bought some shoes. I was just keeping it pretty chill.
Yep.
I think at that stage we may or may not have like locked in whether we were collaborating. My manager at the time was managing him and helping him with releases and stuff. So we were all just really kicking it. And somewhere in the midst, when we were talking about rappers and who we like, I was asking him. He's like, "Oh, I like Action Bronson." I'm like, "Oh, cool." He goes, "Yeah, he's a great beat picker." That's a first and main thing he said. I like Action Bronson. Not he's got good punchlines or cadence or whatever. He's a good beat picker. And then
he is though. But I think he gets a lot of Alchemist. If you can't go wrong if you hang around with Alchemist a lot.
Yeah, that's true. But like, I think what he was saying is like, even when he's not with Alchemist, when he's left to his own devices, he'll string together a good. Like he was real. Like who else? Joey Badass. He's a good beat picker. Ghostface. He's a good beat picker. That was the main thing he said. Is that he enjoyed, and I guess he's a producer, and his producer ear was saying, I like these people. And then I realized, like in the past, I've spoken about this before, and other friends have told me, they're like, you're a terrible beat picker. It's like you want to rap on everything, so you rapping on this, you're rapping on this, you're rapping on this. You don't have your own like sound world. Maybe that's what they were saying. But it was interesting hanging with Apollo Brown prior to making the track.
Yeah.
That the way he would gauge a rapper is how they pick a beat, and that changed perspective a lot on how this was in the downtime of me not making records, and I took a lot out of that conversation. If I was to go make a record, like if there's room to improve, I knew there was room to improve as a beat picker.
Yeah.
So I got that from hanging and doing the track with Apollo Brown, which is cool.
And that's a very interesting like concept and way to look at it. Like I know that people say a lot about Nas and he is a bad beat selector.
Yep.
And then there's also another conversation that Jay-Z is, I'm not going to say overrated, but he's thrown up in this conversation a lot. An amazing beat picker. Like he seems to really select great beats.
Look, as I said, it was refreshing to hear someone take that ability to pick a beat and make that as the main thing they like about an artist.
Yeah.
Like it's almost like that DJ. Buck prides himself. Tupac prides himself on making these beautiful playlists, beautiful mixtapes, and there's a skill in creating like a sound world out of other people's music. So I think to hear him just so overtly say he's a good beat picker, doesn't say anything about the way he raps. I was just like, that was cool because it made me realize it's like, dude, you don't give a shit. You guys are good rapper. You give a shit if he makes a good album, and I kind of took a lot out of that,
which is cool.
Yeah, it was a great experience to learn from someone like him what he reveres in a rapper.
So that leads me to a question: what do you think is? It might be hard to pick one. The best hip hop beat that you think of all time. What's one that you can? Oh, it's hard. It's hard.
Whoa.
I know.
Whoa.
Too hard? Or just tell us a couple of favorites. Like what song do you hear and you just want to start spit rhymes? Like you just hear it and you're like, fuck man, or your head's nodding and you're like, this is a tune.
Well, like it's you could say all of Illmatic.
Yep.
Like as far as quotables, like I think a beat and a rap and wanting to quote the verse versus the actual production, I don't think they're sometimes the same thing.
Yep.
Like I would say for me the most quotable verse, even though it's actually quite hard to quote in its entirety, would be Triumph.
Yep.
Inspector Deck. But when that kicks in, whoever is in that room is going to drop the first 4 bars of that.
And there's no chorus or anything.
There's no chorus or anything. They're like, is Triumph the best beat of all time? Like it's a tricky sort of combination of things. But yeah, I'm just gonna say it's too hard to answer that question. Okay. Like majority of Nas Illmatic, so many of Primo's beats. Even Nas's Like is just...
That is probably my favourite, man.
Like, well, it's it's for some weird reason when you said it, that was the first...
That's my one,
thing that popped into my head.
It's hard not to bob your head when that comes on.
Oh, it's just like, it was like a horde of people trying to get through a tiny gate when you said that. I just, like, my brain just went... Yeah, I can't, like, yeah. Like, I thought you were going to ask me who's the best beat picker, and then that I might try and come up, like, add something to that conversation. But to just go, what is the best beat? It's just like, man, I don't even know where to begin. Like, yeah.
And I like Freedom from Jail clips inserted, that whole thing of the stuff. Man, it's just an amazing track.
Yeah, I wish I had an answer for you, bro. I'm too cooked off that one.
That's all good, man. So, look, we talked about you've worked with a lot of artists. Like, who is someone that you wish that you could work with, like in Australia, and then somebody overseas, like in a dream. There's a genie here, and they've gone, dude, you can work with whoever you want. We're going to set it up tomorrow. Who would you work with in Australia, and who would you work with overseas?
Well, the people that I wanted to work with in Australia, I actually really targeted them for what would become Longer Days.
Yep.
So we won't get to Longer Days just yet, but I had a certain list. I realized in the same vein as what we're talking about with beat picking, I think if you're going to be really strategic and structured with the production that you choose, the guest verses and are just as critical, because the 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 array of albums I could make could be so wildly different. I could get the same producers as all of those obese people got, and make something that would sound quite well produced, high production values. Might sound Australian, for lack of a better term. I've got, managers and ex people that I used to work with who know, like Apollo Brown and Detroit producers who are American. I've worked with international producers via those sort of means. So when I was thinking about making another album or making new tunes, I was like, I have to really narrow that scope. Don't like get like, I would love to work with Elzai, but I think Elzai is a phenomenal lyricist. But then, like, if you throw Elzai and then Checkers on the same song, is it going to hit the same as having like Checkers and Brad Strut on the same song? I like the balance. I know what I want to hear more, and it's going back to that beat picking scenario. I know what's going to sound. It's not to say Checkers not going to sound nice next to Elzai or vice versa. I just know it's going to hit with a particular flavor that is going to work best. If I got Elzai and Sky Zoo with Apollo Brown producing, and then I rapped on it, but then you're the odd one out. Then I might sound weird.
Yeah,
and I could probably pull that off with I know enough people who are connected to those artists to try and pull that off. If you got someone like I don't know, Delta and West Side Gun. I'm not even like a huge West Side Gun fan. I'm just throwing that name out there. I'm more of a Conway, the Machine fan. If you got Delta and Conway on the same track, is that going to sound good? So I was less.
I'd like to hear that though.
I'd be strangely intrigued, but it'd be hard to pull off.
Yeah,
it'd be hard to balance those things. So I was more concerned about, as much as I have these trophy collaborations that I'd love to do in the fantasy world in my head, it was more about realistic things that were going to actually sound good, because I've done those sorts of collabs with, I had Death Wish and Chip Fu, which were both like influences on me rapping quick. And I even talked about this with Jake. I think when he was asking about the Chip Fu, he's like, that's a weird person to pick. But the manager I had at the time kind of knew his camp and could tee that up. So for 14, 15-year-old me, it's like, yeah, Death Wish and Fushniken's sick. But then by the time, you fast forward 10 years and Plutonic Labs producing and Chip Fu's on it and Death Wish is on it, then I'm on it. It works, but it's less in that it's like there's a lot of ingredients in there to match up and reconcile with each other. So it was like, when I was moving into making a new album, I was like, who's the Australian bucket list that I'd really want on there? And like Delta was on there, Brad Strut was on there, Trem's on there, Lazy was on there. I still rate Draft. I hit up Drafto. He was down to do it, but he was busy. I was going to get Talakai, young rapper, on there. I've worked with him like a few years ago, and he's popping and doing some really cool stuff. I think he just got a little bit busy. So I wanted to have predominantly people from the gen that was slightly above mine, because I wanted to make the music of like what I was G'd up on as a teenager / 20-year-old. So like I was all about LC, Delta, Lazy, the Kings, so to speak.
So you've done that.
I pretty much got without fast tracking to my new record. But like it was just like the
here it is.
It's like the artist that I wanted to work with. I was really lucky that Checkers was a huge one. Checkers is an underground king, and I rate him so highly as a
intelligent guy, man.
And he's a great dude, and I do think he gets the respect he deserves, and then sometimes I think he doesn't. Like I just think he works on levels that I think a huge chunk of the scene are not aware of how great he is as a recording artist and a live performer. So to do something with Checkers was always something in the back of my head. Again, just going back to that early 2000s, even just slightly before the obese era, of just artists there that I've really rated and here. So all the LC, you know, they're so dope. All of them are so dope. So reached out to Brad. He was down, which was just cool. He was like, "This is a bucket list for me." So I was just like, geeked out on that. As I was going to hit up Delta, I don't really know him. I didn't want to come out of the blue, but I'd love to do a track with Delta. I think that'd be fun.
Yeah, for sure. And maybe the draft one you could do on a in the future.
Well,
did you have the song? Did you have the beat
I actually
picked
had
out?
it written for him. It was one of the more faster sort of double time ones, and he just said to me, he goes, "Look, man, this is going to take me too long to get that done." He goes, "I can't do it quick." So I was like, "Cool." And but like we'd spoken about doing songs, but like I still rate him. There's a lot of younger artists too that I rate. JK47.
Yep,
I really like his stuff.
He's like Nerve.
I do like Nerve Man, but I to be honest, I haven't listened to a lot of his stuff. What I've listened to, I've enjoyed. Like he's definitely the standout of that. Him and Chillin' It stand out, just for their beastliness. But and this is no disrespect to either of those two, but like a lot of the playlists that I listen to, it's very samey. It's not them, so to speak, but as an entire scene, whatever you call it, modern, contemporary, Australian rap, Australian drill, or whatever they call it. When a playlist plays at work or in a club or something, and it's Australian, and it just goes back to back to back to back. There's some of those songs, and it's not them so much.
Yeah.
That it just is. It's hella samey, and it's just, again, I'm probably sounding like old man punching at the clouds, but like I do feel like there's a lot of diversity in rap, and so they stand out in that crowd. But I think it's because of the other artists cocooned around them. It stops me wanting to go out of my way to check some of that stuff out, because there's maybe people imitating them, maybe more so the production values than anything else. It's just like, man, I have my fill real quick of that.
It is, and it kind of gets to the point.
But anything that pops up with them in it is dope.
Yeah.
And so like I've stopped. Like I was getting a lot of it just come through via playlists or wherever I was working, because it's like huge and everyone's listening to it anyway. Wombat's dope.
Yeah, Wombat's.
So yeah, Wombat's crazy dope. I listen to him. But yeah, like those guys as lyricists, I would do shit with them. But like I don't really classify myself in their lane or them in mine or whatever.
Yeah,
I'm sticking in my lane, and there's little bits of my influences which I think predate what they're doing, which they've taken to another spot. But I'm happy to keep my little proto version of what they've done and keep that in my lane. And if it converges with someone else's vein of that era, cool. But I'm not going to go out of I'm not going to chase down Nerve like I would chase down like Delta, or Lazy, or something like that. Someone from my gen.
Yeah. What do you call your lane? What genre is your lane? What do you?
Like,
how are you gonna...
That was probably the hardest thing writing the record, to be honest, is to go what, like, you've gone a long time off. My influences musically are really too broad, way too broad.
But I don't think there's a such thing as too broad, like music influence wise.
Influence wise, you can have great broad influences. That's fine. But what you pump out, if you pump out the same breadth of your influences, it might be a bit jarring.
Yeah,
you
need it to be cohesive.
Yeah, just because you listen to Mike Patton and Pavarotti doesn't mean that you do. Well, actually, that probably would work really well. Mike Patton, Pavarotti.
It's probably
a bad example, but like Alchemist and Mike Patton. Just get Mike Patton out of there, because he'll work with everything. But you know what I'm saying? Like, you don't want to come out sounding like Mr. Bungle, and then sounding like Big Crit, and then sounding like, I don't know, Task Force, and then sounding like, 6ix9ine. I don't know. You want to try and get something. I think that was the hardest problem, is going, merging all these chats together. Is Apollo Brown saying, he reveres beat pickers. It's like, well, I'm shit at that. Let's work on it. All right, what beats do you pick? Well, I like a shit ton of different beats.
Yeah.
What do I want to rap on? Well, everything. Well, okay, let's like I was in the my thing was, what are you listening to right now? Because I think where I started to go potentially wrong and take the wrong path was I was listening to obese records when I was on obese records.
Yeah, so the influence wasn't coming from outside.
So I was making albums that fans of obese would like because I was listening to the Hoods, I was listening to Draft, I was listening to Muffin Plutonic, I was listening to Pigs. So whatever I make, it's like I'm using all the same sort of ingredients, you know, like they're gonna like the flavor because it's gonna sound like the shit that I'm listening to. I was listening to that shit, they're gonna like it.
Yeah.
And then, like, you know, as I grew up and started like expanding and having people like Plutonic Lab and people like Tupac and people, all these, you know, Bigfoot, like just music geeks, just feeding you so much stuff. After a while, what you're listening to is gigantic, and what do you pick and what do you amalgamate together that is essentially what you want to make and what you want to rap on. But I just streamed it back and was like, dude, whatever you shoot to land on, you're not going to land on there. If I try to do an album that wants to sound like Yellow Wolf, you're not going to sound like Yellow Wolf. You want to sound like Jest, you're not going to sound like Jest. You're going to sound like D-Trix with whatever that type of production is there, and you're going to twist it into something that's going to be uniquely mine regardless. Yeah. So I was listening to a shit ton of Alchemist. I was listening to a shit ton of Griselda. I was listening to, you know, Rome Streets. That's sort of a pocket that Tupac has been across for ages. He was onto that movement. He is that hipster who liked that before you liked it. Yeah. He is literally that rap dude who, if there's a new movement popping, he liked it before you liked it. He's literally liked every single movement that has blown up long before it blew up. You know, he was pumping me Kendrick and Black Hippie, and he's like, oh, this dude's going to be the next dude, you know, and then he becomes the next dude. He's like, oh, I don't like it anymore. He does not do that. He does a little bit, but he was across the whole Griselda movement, was like drip feeding it to me for years and years and years, and then just as I started to, you know, take it, he became far more nuanced in the artists and was researching them, and he's showing me, you know, producers like Future Wave, who I rate. He's just got, he just pumps out these mixtape after mixtape of just crazy up and coming underground American artists. So, but the world of production sort of introduced me to just the various ways that people don't have to sound so alchemisty, for lack of a better term. They can just have their own spin on these sort of minimalistic, sample-orientated things. And I think he uses a great combination of samples and sub. Yeah. So he has boom bap like samples with crazy low ends, and I was just like, that is the world I want it to be. Yeah. That's the planet I want to land on. That's planet D-Trix. Let's try and build it, and sort of went from there. So there was a lot of key albums that I was listening to, like the Prodigy Alchemist. I was listening to Alchemist and Conway, Lulu. Yeah. That sounds stupid here. Alchemist and Freddie Gibbs, Alfredo. So all of those were, aside from the Prodigy album, were all in a kind of close succession of release, and they were all sort of just leading into the pandemic. So I'd started like a couple of apprenticeships, and I was just like driving in the Prado, just banging Alchemist, Griselda. But like knowing the whole time is going, dude, maybe your fans that you grew up listening to Outkast and Obese, they may not be listening to boom, 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 boom. And it's like, and then it just comes to that point where it's just like, I just don't care.
Well, you've got to make music that you enjoy, and especially now when it's not your full-time gig. If you're making it for other people, you're making it for the wrong reasons, aren't you?
100%. Well, it was just like I had to go back to this idea that when I first, as a New Zealand-born dude, rapping in an Australian accent with a bunch of other white dudes who are getting pissing off a lot of other white dudes for doing it, and there seemed very little prospect of that taking off. Yeah. And then it totally took off. I had to just keep reminding myself that strange mutations of genres and influences are totally possible. Yep. And that if you just take the shit that take your dad life, take your dad content, pull out all of the references to crack cocaine, and rap on the beats that you're listening to, will that work? And I was making this album going, I have no idea if this is going to work.
Yeah.
I have no idea if this is going to be a catastrophic failure, if people think it's too slow, if people think it's too boring, if people think it's too minimal, people think the content is just like, it's not about titties and shaking that ass, and it's like, standing out as being too over the top with your dadness or your mopiness.
Dadness, yeah.
Like, I had no idea. I just didn't care. Genuinely didn't care. So it's going back to that sort of thing that we were saying before. It's like, try and get the attention. Yes, look at me, but I'm doing this. But I'm doing this strictly just to get out what's in here.
Yep.
And it may work, it may not work. And I was going through it hoping that in the end it would come together, but I got maybe to the mixing stage and I was just like, holy shit, this is not working.
You didn't think it was working?
Well, I didn't think it was working until the mixing stage. So when I was dealing with, traditionally when I'd make a record, we would structure songs, we would structure choruses, and there was a lot of building that was happening along the way. I was just writing the raps with a pretty sparse sample-based beat, and it was pretty unfinished, and my raps were pretty slow, and the raps are pretty dad-like, and I didn't really get to hear a lot of feedback or hear a lot of progression.
Yeah. So
they were basically in demo phase all the way up to the mixing stage. So I was shitting myself that this thing was like a diabolical failure. Like genuinely shitting myself. Like I'd hit up Len One from Milesago. He was happy enough to and he's a legend of the scene. He was like, I'll back a release. He started out with a single. I said, I want to do an album. So we spoken over the course of a year or so. And I kept saying, I'm going to deliver this album. I'm going to deliver this album. I hadn't really sent a lot of it to him. So he wasn't privy to how it was really unfolding or what I was building.
But he'd heard us sing.
He'd heard like a couple of tunes. And to be honest, the tunes that I sent him, I ended up scrapping anyway. So he was just more had a sort of blind faith that everything was going to work out. And then as I was going in recording my raps, like when you record a rap, it still sounds pretty shitty. Like sometimes your backups aren't fully backed up. Sometimes the mix sounds shit. So I wasn't really listening to it like, oh yeah, man, this is killer. You really killed that. Like I was just recording. And then when it came time to mix it, like it just kicked in. It was like, dude, what have you done? Yeah. Like there's like one or two songs above 80 BPM. This thing, like your live show is known for like 90 to 140 BPM, and you are like way slower. What if these people don't listen to have never listened to an Alchemist album? What if these people don't like anything slow? What if these people are not grieving a dying dad? What if these people don't want to hear about your shitty dad raps? Or the fact that you're turning into an old grey-haired man. Like, it just kicked in. Like, dude, you may have just totally effed this way up. But the thing that I was happy with was, like, I picked a spot and just went to that spot.
Yeah.
And then when it got mixed and Phil Gecko, he's an amazing rapper, amazing producer, and he's also, like, he is so bloody good at mixing and mastering. I cannot speak more highly than him.
Yep.
He came in, he touched up a few beats, added some production, and by the time he started sending back the mix and the master, like my confidence just went, like it just skyrocketed.
Yep.
Like he made all these little patches like be the album.
Yep.
And like he took all of the different producers, he sort of ironed them out. He added the low end that I wanted. Like he even came back and he's just like, man, I think this has got too much sub. It might be getting too muddy. I'm like, just do it, man. And he's like, okay. He's like, I'm game. And I was just like, no, I just want it to be like, if it's if it's just like, obnoxiously subby, I'm like, I don't care. Like I've never really had an album that's like crazy low end sub, and I'm just like, just pump the sub. So like by the time he mixed it and mastered it, it came back as a project and a vision that I really hoped it would be. But right up into that last second, it's like cooking almost.
Yeah.
Sometimes you'd be cooking something and you go, oh man, I've fucked this one, like it was too hot, or like smoked that brisket too long, or I used too much charcoal, and then you wait and you wait, let it rest, and you cut through, and then it just spills out all the oil, and you're like, yeah, man, I did it. Like it was like right up to the last hour of constructing the record that I actually felt confident that I hadn't completely stuffed the whole thing up.
And in the end, you're happy with the final product.
Oh man, I'm extremely happy because I have never really done it that way.
Yeah.
So
And you mentioned Milesago, so obviously those guys are doing some amazing stuff, and like just by them wanting to back you must give you that little extra vote of confidence as well.
massively. Well, it's just I think what was missing before, and we were talking about Oz hip hop getting big or blowing up, and artists getting big and getting careers, and like me saying, "Oh, well, I sort of rejected that. I never wanted it." All of that sort of stuff is true, but I was also looking for that sort of cohesion and family that branding and that a good label has. So whether it's Nuff Said, Obese, Elephant Tracks, Uncut, Hydro Funk, I was looking for that family feeling of I want my album to sit next to that person, and I want to like their record. And again, like no disrespect to the people I was on the label with, but I wasn't listening to their records. Yeah. They were probably not listening to my records. My stuff probably wasn't theirs. But I wanted to be on a label where if, like I said, when Obese came out, and if it was ABC Rapper, I'd be grabbing ABC Rappers. I wanted that experience where like if they drop something, I want to buy it. I want to be a part of that. So like to set sort of that feedback loop of I want to sound like them. I want them to sound like me. I want to be a part of a team.
I want to be in the echo chamber.
Yeah, I wanted all that sort of stuff. So when I saw Milesago, when they started doing the retrospective pressings and coming back and doing Death Wish and doing Delta and doing Strut and doing Terra Firma, and I was just like, oh man, that's my cut of cloth. Yeah. That's the cut of cloth I want to be a part of. And I was thinking in my head, if he was to do any new stuff, I would love to do new stuff with him. And it just so happens that Lenny was thinking the same way. He's just like, man, I was wondering where you're at. I did a track with Insidious, and I think that sort of sealed it for him. He's like, because that came out, Insidious's album came out on Milesago, and then he was like, oh, would you do more tracks? And I want to do an album. And then so we just grew the idea from there. But like I was sort of gravitating towards him anyway, because there are other options that I wanted to hit up. Like I'm like a big fan of the Pang family and what they release. I don't think the music that I make might sit as nicely next to a Pang release as it would with Lenny. So I'm happy it went with Lenny. But I definitely hit them up because they've got the same sort of values of what I was hunting.
Yeah, for sure. And well, we've talked about the record. It's going to come out yesterday.
It's going to come out yesterday.
It's going to come out yesterday, or it's going to come out. It came out yesterday.
It came out yesterday.
We're like in the future or something.
Futurists people. It came out yesterday. I'm really happy with the result. We've sold out.
Yeah. But if you did still want to get a copy.
But if you did still want one, yes, it went live yesterday.
I think so, yeah. So this should come out, and it went live yesterday.
Yeah.
And where can people get themselves a copy? How can they get themselves a copy of an album that's been, let's say, 10 years in the making? Yeah. Or 10 years in your head.
You could say that, like, it's been 10 years between drinks. I got serious about making it in the last 3 years. It's definitely 3 years of solid, like, where I am presently at. There were tunes that were 10 years old that didn't make the cut because they're just not where I'm at anymore.
Yeah.
Style-wise, rapping-wise, the content-wise, there was at least 2 or 3 songs that we had there that could have gone on that just didn't fit. But it's certainly where we've been for the last 3 or 4 years. I've been chipping away at this. It's a huge relief to get it out. I'm incredibly proud of what it is, and the fact that that someone like Lenny and Milesago and Chubba are happy to try and back it. But yeah, man, we've got limited runs of this press. So it may be the last run. I'm not going to say it will be the last run, but we've got 3 tiers. We've got the black, the standard cover. moving beautifully moving into the
Who
the
did
plug.
who did the artwork? Who did the artwork?
So Carl Ellison did the artwork for this.
So he also he's the cinematographer guy.
Correct.
So
yeah.
and he did the film clip for you.
Correct. So he I hit him up originally. I'd done some stuff with Carl. He did a clip for me on the last solo album, and he's down this way and out my way.
Is he?
Yeah, he's.
Do you reckon
he's
he'd ever do the show, man?
Well, Carl. Maybe.
Yeah, he'd be cool.
Yeah, hit him up, man.
Yeah.
Hit him up. I'm sure he'd love to come on. He's he's an amazing photographer, graph writer, cinematographer. So I just hit him up just to see where he's at. I wanted to try something a little different. I wanted to just strip things back a little bit and just see what I could come up with. I sort of fed him a few ideas and bounced some stuff off. Weirdly enough, I based this off a Jamie Thomas skateboard. So
A zero skateboard?
a zero skateboard. I could find the photo and send it to you if you want to cut it in.
Yeah,
somehow.
let's do that. Yeah, that'd be sick.
But yeah, I started from that and just said that I wanted something that was sort of stencil looking, and then yeah, I just explained to him, like, again, it was a little bit like the mixing process where I'm like, he goes, oh, what's your ideas? I'm like, I want a masked figure in neon stencil crying into a flower.
Like, I've overcooked it again.
And then he kind of nailed it. So yeah, it's Carl Ellison did the artwork. As I said, Gecko mixed and mastered. There's beats by Calski. Dyl Thomas did some beats on there, who I'm a massive fan of his raps and his beats. And also 7-6, who helped me record it at Stronghorn Studios just around the corner in Narre Warren. We've got the black, we've got the blue vinyl.
And then who's on the cuts? $2?
$2 is on the cuts for 2 of the tunes. And then DJ Butcher's on one of the tunes as well. I may or may not have credited him. But yeah. There we go.
That's your credit there.
I thought it was on a Calski tune from an old tune that they did together. Actually, I'm tripping because that didn't make it onto the album. Anyway, that might be a limited run vinyl down the track. But
so yeah, people can cop it online or also physically. If you got some physical stuff.
For now, it's going to be strictly online. There may be some leaks going through to sort of indie stores.
Yep.
So your Union Heights,
yep.
etc.
Union Heights gets what is a line? Slap in the face like you're walking to Union Heights or something like that.
So face to slap like walking into Union.
The slap box right there.
Yeah. He got a special shout out on the record. He's literally dropped on it. So I'm sure that Slap will get his copies.
So you're talking about Slap as in it's Frank. I'm thinking the slap box, but I'm thinking the two different slaps.
No, yeah.
You're talking about slap 618.
Yes.
But I'm thinking when you walk in, you get the slap boxes right there where you slap your stickers.
I'm talking about
actual slap.
Frank.
There you go. So that I read more into that than I thought.
Well, maybe I'm like Jay-Z. Has work on like so many levels.
Well, there you go.
So many levels of double entendres or whatever. But yeah, it's been a while in the works. It's going to be 100 pressed per one, so we're going to go live with 100 black, 100 teal with the same, and then the alternate cover, which is going to have signed, personalized lyric sheets in it. Wow. So that one's going to take a little bit of extra time to ship out. That went live yesterday.
Oh yeah, yesterday.
Yesterday
happened. Yeah. And that is a line that I did like. There's a couple of lines that stood out to me from. Well, let's say there was some songs there that seemed to be pretty deep and personal. And I think Parallel Universe, that one that was pretty personal.
Yep.
Is like, do you want to?
Yeah, I don't mind talking about that. That was the going beyond beat picking and going beyond like sonics and all that sort of stuff. For the very first time, I mapped an album out in a linear order. So I heard a beat, went, that's track number 4. So I had already had like about 3 or 4 songs, and I'm like, that's track number 1. I had a beat from Dyl Thomas, and I'm like, that's the first track. It turned out to be Old Man Flow. I wrote it, and like I wrote Old Man Flow as like, this is an introductory song because this beat is number 1. I got what else? So there's like 2 or 3 other beats in there, but I gave them a number. Like I didn't write 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, but I'm like, this
That's where
sits at
they'll
1.
sit.
It's got this particular feel. It's going to be a 1. This one is going to be 3. This one's going to be 7. It's going to be whatever. And I was structuring the album like that until my dad passed away. And that totally like circumvented that process for a bit. It's just like, my dad passed away. My partner was pregnant. We went into lockdown, lost some jobs, went through COVID. Does anyone really want to hear that sort of shit? Not really. So I was kind of mindful of the fact that everyone is emotionally burnt out. It's not. It's almost like there is no room for a sob story anymore. Because if someone goes on right now and says, "I had a really hard day because of this," someone's going to go Palestine. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it's just no. There is no room in this day and age, and it's not just now. Like, you could have gone back to then, and there was George Floyd, who are referencing there very loosely. You know, that was the Black Lives Matter movement. There's COVID. People are just yelling all the time, and we're emotionally drained and inadvertently apathetic about it. And as I was saying before, like, our brains are quite adept at turning off if things get emotionally too heavy. So I was going through an emotionally heavy time period, but also knowing that I was like, dude, is there any space out there now to do a song where you put all that out? And I was just like, if it was to be done, it needs to be just highly personalized, because there was a lot of COVID-y songs out at the time, and no disrespect to anyone who did one of those, I just didn't listen to them. I just didn't want any reminder.
I'm the same.
Like, I didn't want to hear, like, if I was in a box and in a jail, I don't want someone there going, "We're in jail, where?" I was just like, I wanted to be transported into fantasy land, and I literally just watched fantasy and read fantasy. Like, I was watching Lord of the Rings, I was reading, like, Berserk manga. I was just fantasy, because anything that was too realistic, I just didn't want to bar off. So then when my dad passed away, and then my daughter which I didn't know was my daughter, was potentially going to have health complications, which was seeming very real and daunting at the time, and then lack of jobs, and then he passed away, and then financial hardships, and then my daughter was born. I was like, how do you structure that into a tune, and how does that fit into the scope of something else that you're already doing? So I put the album making on back burner and just sat it back for a bit. Heard a tune by 7-6, which was eerily reminiscent in my head of, like, Nas's like, there we say, like, what's the best beat, and then I even, like, paid homage slash ripped off the cut sort of intro, and blatantly showed reference to that, and then I just wrote to that, and then what happened was it got so personal so quickly and so condensed, and on the nose, so to speak. Nothing was, like, hidden, or I was writing with all these, like, hidden messages and hidden layers and hidden word players. Like, all of that just got shoved out the window and just went literal and hit everyone with what was going on.
Because it was therapeutic for yourself.
And I just wanted to get it out. Like, it just was something that needed to happen, and that was ultimately what made the project become very real, because there was a driving force then, beyond just wanting to make an album. Like, I'd been piss farting around about making an album for 10 years, and every time I give it a little shot, I'd give up and move away. Where that tune became the first single, even though there were other stuff in there, and then I was just like, well, where does this fit in an album context? It's going to fit somewhere in the middle of the record, because it's just so freaking heavy. I don't want it at the end, I don't want it at the start, and then I'm going to sculpt everything around that. So it was important to have that in my head, because I had to have a purpose for I couldn't just release it as a single. It wasn't something for radio. How props to how he gave it a play on Triple J.
Cool.
in the middle of the day, which I thought was pretty, like, crazy. So good on him for that. Buck came through with the cuts. Buck was in a bit of a spot where he was he didn't have a hell of a lot of spare time, and I had to really strong arm him into doing it. But I'm so glad he did, and he jumped on there and did some killer cuts on it. But that really was the catalyst for just going, okay, the song came out, and I think a lot of people heard it. They resonated with the the depth of it, and the clarity of it. I guess, like, it comes through very just just sort of speaks. It doesn't bullshit or fuck around. But I think a lot of people who were waiting for an album may not have heard it. Yeah. So even though it had been released, the album has come out, and I'm not surprised, but like it is the one that everyone's just like, dude, it kind of just hit me out of nowhere. And it's because I didn't want to have an album that was just heavy. Yeah. When you go out and you go out for dinner, you're not going to eat like 5 pasta dishes. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like people have it, and I'm acutely aware of the emotional capacity that people have. That they tap out real quick, man. That emotional fuse gets blown real quick. I didn't want to hit you with 10 parallel universes in a row. Like, I want you to want to listen to the record. You know, if you get to that album, if you get to that song and it hits you in a particular way, cool. But I don't want to do that for the whole thing. And so there's little flex after that's kind of like the king hit of emotional, damage. Yeah. So to speak, and there's might be other little jabs throughout the rest of the record, and there's little references to my dad passing, but it's not as full on of like this is a really full on experience. But I was paranoid that given COVID, that no one would really want to listen to it post COVID. Again, like no disrespect to anyone who did a COVID tune, but I don't want to listen to it now. Yeah. I didn't want to listen to it when COVID was there. I don't want to listen to it now. So I was actually very surprised that this came out a decent whack after. Hopefully that shit just doesn't ever come back. Yeah. Like whatever we had to deal with, lockdowns, etc. I was surprised that people still were like, I like this tune, or this tune took me places, or it affected me, and it seems to be the one people talk about the most. But I don't know how much they would tolerate 4 or 5 or 6 of those in a row.
So you talked about Carl Ellison before, and he did the clip for you, which was John Connor.
Yeah.
So why did you pick that track to do the clip?
It's a good question, and I don't know. I guess there was a part of me that thought, and maybe it's a little bit of a lack of confidence in the project. As I said, I was listening to much slower tunes. I was listening to production that I thought maybe my core fan base might not like. I came off the back of doing a show with the Resin Dogs and Hydro Funk, and played all the older songs, which are 90 to 100 BPM horns, Australian hip hop, and there was quite a few people who were really enjoying it, possibly in a nostalgic sort of way. And then I met up with Calski the next day to run through this record, and we played through some of the tunes, and he just even said, like, without even thinking, he's like, dude, how are you going to perform this live? He just literally said that, because some of the songs, like, I think we were working on Longer Days, and the original version of the
song Longer Days.
Yeah, the song Longer Days, which is the last track to close it out. And we're working on that. It pretty much didn't have a beat. And then he was just like, man, like, how are you going to perform this live? Like after the shit you played last night, he's like, this would just stink live. So I was very conscious of trying to sort of build a bit of a bridge between where I was and where I'm at and where I want to be. Have a bit of a stepping stone. And so, I was saying, I wrote, this was track 1, that was track 2, that was track 3. There was a gaping hole at number 2. So there was about 3 or 4 songs we had gone through that were going to be track number 2 that just had to provide a certain energy, a certain lift, a certain pickup. Old Man Flow, which kicks it off, is really slow, and it talks about being an old man. Like, it's a bit of a downer way to move into a new record. You got to pick that shit up. So whether it's an energy lift, whether it's a rap lift or a BPM lift. So I just went, I need something in the 90s, man. I need something and then we just went through, and then I heard the beat for it, and I was just like, yeah, that's the one. That's the one there. And so that always for me had this sort of, it had a sort of energy that I thought would really hit a few people who were into, maybe their LC, maybe they were into, early enough said stuff, maybe they're into just faster, darker sounding stuff. And it was just the track I wanted to have visuals to.
Did you come up with the concept?
I sat with Carl and I sat with Mike, who is the director. and we met up in Frankston. They'd heard the tune. I actually gave them 3 tunes. So I gave them. Carl really wanted to do the Strut track. He was always banking on that being the clip. I just sort of said, look, I think it may be a clip, but for the first clip, I didn't want to go with that particular tune. There was one called The Present, which was like a slower, more sub-heavy double time rap, which I thought would be like a cool summary thing. And then there was John Connor. They came back and said they think John Connor was the one. We sort of had a consensus on that. And then when we were coming up with clip ideas, we had 2 weeks to turn a clip around. And Mike and Carl are from the movie industry where they make horror films, and they're doing quite well for themselves. Carl has been doing video clips for Tones and I, so he's got like a tremendous amount of like resources and people and technology and skills. And we were just geeking out on horror. Now, as I said, the album was starting to grow like a type of canon, I guess. Like there were things that I could intuitively start to feel were in sync with the album or not in sync with the album. I was taking on DIY sort of ideas, so the aesthetic was to be, more sort of spray painty, more sort of, like we're doing it ourselves. I originally was going to film a clip on like a GoPro or
definitely didn't do that. It's very
no.
professional.
So when like Carl did the artwork, and then he's like, do you want to do a clip? I knew going with Carl and his push towards his, his cinematic qualities would be going essentially against the canon. And then, so I was a bit like, is this fitting with the theme of, coming back and doing something that's more darker and more underground? Is it going to work? And then basically I was like, it's a tribute album to my dad, and he and I love horror. So I was just like, if he was here, he would be geeking hard on the fact that I basically made a horror film. That I had the resources to make a horror film. Yeah. And then I was just like, but how could I tie it in concept wise? And then I was like, well, I kind of stopped making music because I felt like it was somewhat killing me. So we turned that idea into what eventuated into a horror clip. And then I felt like I was very pedantic about the way that was edited, that clip. I broke Carl and Mike's balls, micromanaged probably the most I've done throughout the project, just to get the effect that I was after. Because merging, as you've asked why John Connor, merging a fast track with slow moving horror turns out to be really fucking difficult.
It would be.
But I think we struck the balance in the end, probably much to their agony. But yeah, that's how we came up with that one. They picked the track. We naturally moved forward from our love of horror, and because it's a tribute record to my dad and his death, and he loves horror, I was just like, I just don't really give a shit what anyone thinks.
And you're happy with the end product, obviously?
I'm happy with it. My mum hates it. Yeah. She's not a big horror fan, but she's like, this is the only thing I'm not going to share online. She's like, I had to watch my child die. So like I know it's not for everyone. Some people were just like, man, that was hard to watch.
It's confronting.
Yeah, some people were just like, man, that was full on. And like, they may not get the symbolism or the meanings of it all. But some people do. Even my kids weirdly got what was going on in it. Yeah. And I shouldn't be really saying that they watched that. But, they was old enough and smart enough in my care to know what was going on. But it felt concerningly out of touch with what I was doing to begin with, and those fears like excited me and challenged me and compelled me to want to do it. And as we're doing it, I was really starting to freak out, like, going, man, is this just going to work? Is this going to? But like, I was freaking out when I made the record anyway, so I just rolled with it, and I did a horror film. I did a self-indulgent horror film.
And you said that the whole thing was you were running it linearly from start to finish. The last track, which is the title track, well, what the album's named after, it's got a really wonky sort of jagged beat, and I was wondering what the motivation behind having that as the last one. Is that like because you want to leave people a bit sort of like we don't know where it's going?
It's just like honing in on that factor of trying to pick good beats and just going, what does this beat say to me? Where does it fit? Where would it fit in an album? I've written enough songs that if I hear a line, I'll go, oh, that might be in the middle of the first verse. If I hear a punchline like face a slap, like walking into Union Heights, and like that to me feels like it should come somewhere near the middle of the second verse. It's just a weird sequencing thing that goes on now. So when I hear beats, they'll be like, oh, this sounds light, this sounds summery. Some people like can attribute colors to a beat. Well, this sounds like a yellow beat or a green beat or a dark or a blue or whatever. And when I heard the sample for that, it sort of sounded hopeful. It sort of sounded melancholic. It sort of sounded like the beat was sort of battered around a bit.
It sounds like it's been sort of
ripped. It's sort of been stretched and it's kind of not coping but getting back on track. And even though there was no real beat to it or like any sort of value that would traditionally make a song appealing, I'm like, this is the spirit animal of the whole album. Yeah. And I said that to Calski, and he's just like, oh wow, that's weird. It's like, that's weird. He was just like surprised that would be the title. I said, this is the title tune, and it's going to be the last song. Yeah. And that was before it was called Long. The working title was Caveman. So like that was the working title of the whole thing, and I'm like, that's Caveman. I just called it Caveman. And
why Caveman?
Lockdown.
Fair enough.
And like it was just like sort of going back to primitive, like that was the working title. Yep. and then it slowly evolved into, it still stayed the last song, still stayed the titular track. Yep. It just wasn't Caveman, it was called Longer Days.
And there is some, I'm gonna say, very D-Trix lines on there that people would sort of remind them of some of your earlier works, and one of them is I'm a loose unit on a tight budget. I think that was that was one that stood out. I'm like, I like that, and it's something that you could have that line on one of your first albums, and it would have fit in.
I think a really beautiful thing about writing that record and collaborating with the dream people that I wanted to get on it is that they all could have gone in different areas. Like Flu was an artist sort of 10 years ago that's graduated and evolved to a different style of rapping. Checkers has stayed extremely consistent, but it's still evolved as an artist. Brad Strut has, grown into a newer version of himself, a more mature version of himself. So I was not concerned, but I was curious as to how they would come on a beat and whether they would value the same things that I value. Without even telling them, they were all following similar things lyrically than what I was doing, where it was subtlety and it wasn't so hard on the nose, and it was like really soft wordplay. Yeah. There's wordplay that's so soft it may not even come across as punchlines on all of their verses, including my own. So I was already starting to do stuff like that, and then to hear them come back like that was just like, I was really stoked. So like lines like what you just said are probably slightly more obvious, but still then there's like quite a lot of the wordplay is really, really light. Which again was something that, if you've got something like Parallel Universe where it is really straightforward and really emotionally hitting, I enjoyed writing things that were more subtle, more cryptic, and then Loose Unit on a tight budget's probably not as subtle and not as cryptic. But it's more old D-Trix. That whole track's probably slightly more older D-Trix.
You have to give
I'm still gonna keep some stuff there.
You have to, for sure, man. Do you want to shout out your socials and tell people where they can get the album that came out yesterday and what you might have in store in the future?
Check out Milesago, Big Cartel. The link will be on both their Instagram, my Instagram, and also in the bio of my Facebook.
And in the bio of this video.
Go check it out. I will be bringing out new merch. I will be doing some shows, so stay tuned.
Oh, that's exciting. All right, man. Look, I appreciate you coming. We've talked shit for a couple of hours now. If there's nothing else that you want to say, we're going to wrap it up.
Done, mate. Thank you for having me.
Cheers, man.